in Montego Bay.
From the Nationwide News Network, comprehensive, incisive, tough. This is Nationwide at 5.
Good afternoon, I'm Nora Gay Banton.
And I'm Mahiri Stewart.
In Nationwide News at this hour, the JLP's Kamina Johnson-Smith rejects rumors that she's a dual citizen.
My father born in Kingston, my mother born in Trelawney. I born in Kingston. I'm 100% Jamaican.
PNP Senator Lambert Brown labels as hypocrisy the government's position on dual citizenship.
It is the hypocrisy of calling out one for being a dual citizen, but embracing 30% of your own, 30% of your own who are dual citizens.
But JLP Senator Apka Fitzhenley says Senator Brown's assertion is mere propaganda.
The temporary manager of Stocks and Securities Limited, SSL, is handing over operations to the trustee appointed by the principals of the company.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness says massive steps have been taken in strengthening the country's social safety.
And in news from rest of the world, vulnerable small island developing states adopt 10-year plan to fend off severe threats.
Biden unveils 3-stage Israeli proposal to end the Gaza war.
And in headline sports, St. George's College schoolboy Adrian Reed Jr. is called up to the national senior team for World Cup qualifying football.
Later on in our broadcast, in our cover story at 5:35, in a ruling handed down by the Supreme Court on Friday, the Financial Services Commission lost its bid to retain control of fraud-hit investment firm Stocks and Securities Limited. The attorney for SSL's appointed trustee, Caroline Hay, will join us.
From 6 to 8, we'll have a live broadcast from Jamaica College for the Jamaicans for Justice's Constitutional Town Hall meeting.
And at 8, it's the A-Team with Dennis Brooks. All these and more as we take you home on air on your mobile, Nationwide 90 FM, nationwideradiojm.com, and on the Nationwide app, available on the Google Play and the Apple App Store this Friday afternoon, Friday, May 31, 2024.
News at 5 is brought to you by Fostrich Company Limited, fostering rich customer service.
If it's news, it's got to be Nationwide 90 FM.
Now the details. Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade Minister Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith is rejecting as false rumors being circulated by several bloggers from the opposition PNP on social media that she's a dual citizen. Several bloggers have been circulating graphics that bear the image of Minister Johnson-Smith and allege that she's a British citizen. The circulation of the rumor comes as PNP President Mark Golding has been trending on social media over the past week as Jamaicans are heavily criticizing his handling of the revelation that he's a British citizen. Minister Johnson-Smith is scoffing at rumors that she too has split allegiances.
So I noticed that they've been circulating some new graphics, and I can't figure out how they match this one out. My father born in Kingston, my mother born in Trelawney. I born in Kingston. I'm 100% Jamaican. And guess what? No matter how they match it out, Marky British is still British. And I know me say so, and him say so. Leave me out of this one.
Senator Kamina Johnson-Smith, a Foreign Affairs Minister, speaking in a video posted to Instagram a short while ago. Minister Johnson-Smith commented below the video, "I guess desperation is really setting in." The video also had the hashtag 100% Jamaican.
Meanwhile, opposition Senator Lambert Brown on Friday launched a broadside against what he considers the hypocrisy shown by the government regarding the recent dual citizenship concerns. Senator Brown slammed the Holness administration for singling out opposition leader Mark Golding for his British citizenship when many among the government benches similarly hold dual allegiances. Speaking in the Senate, Mr. Brown asserted that as many as 30% of government members in the Senate hold dual citizenship.
The government is quick through the TAJ to claim protection from the Data Protection Act in not telling the taxpayers of Jamaica who you're paying rent to a building for that is unoccupied. You claim protection of the Data Protection Act for that, but you don't claim it for citizens of the country's private and confidential information. It is the hypocrisy. It is the hypocrisy of calling out one for being a dual citizen, but embracing 30% of your own, 30% of your own who are dual citizens. 30% in this chamber.
Similarly, the opposition senator chided Transport Minister Darrell Vaz for releasing to the public information regarding Mr. Golding's dual citizenship. He believes the disclosure and Mr. Vaz's utterances on the topic breach the spirit of the country's data protection framework. He called on the government to distance itself from Vaz's comments or risk losing support for the National Identification System, NIDS.
The people out there fear that your broad support for the minister's statement without any seemingly investigation prior seems to be supportive of the view that nothing is private and secret anymore. Yet the information we're seeking from the people must be held in confidence, must be held private, must be held secret. So you can't have it both ways, where a minister of government says nothing secret and private anymore. If that's the government's position, then certainly this NIDS cannot get my support. You need to renounce that position, and an apology must be made to the Jamaican people.
Lambert Brown, opposition senator.
In the meantime, JLP Senator Abka Fitzhenley says Senator Brown's assertion that 30% of the senators on the government side are dual citizens is mere propaganda.
I think that's best interpreted as Senator Brown's usual propaganda. But look, we have never said that dual citizens are not to be allowed to sit in the Parliament of Jamaica. Ultimately, that's a call for the people of Jamaica to make. Where we have been strong is that someone who aspires to assume the awesome power of Prime Minister of Jamaica or the de facto PM should not be in a situation of split allegiances. That is impractical, inappropriate, and quite frankly a dangerous position to put the country in.
Senator Fitzhenley says his opposition counterpart should advise the PNP president not to insult the people of Jamaica. He says he's disappointed to hear Mr. Golding in recent interviews hesitating on whether he should relinquish his ties to Britain.
What Senator Brown should do is to advise his leader to stop insulting the people of Jamaica by saying that he has to ponder, temporize, agonize, and be emotional about fully committing to Jamaica. That's an embarrassing position for a man who says he wants to lead Jamaica one day to take. Quite embarrassing and unbecoming.
Abka Fitzhenley, government senator, he was speaking with the media outside Gordon House on Friday.
Digital Transformation Minister Dr. Dana Morris-Dixon is calling on Jamaicans to be mindful of falsehoods being spread regarding the National Identification System, NIDS. She gave the caution as the Upper House approved regulations under the new legislation on Friday.
We have WhatsApp messages filled with tons of falsehood, and I get them every few weeks. I saw one that said that the national ID would be compulsory and persons who didn't have it would be arrested. I had one person also tell me how worried his elderly mother was because she thought she was going to be arrested for not having the new ID. We cannot allow this misinformation and disinformation to continue without those who know better intervening and explaining what the law actually says. There is no provision in the NIDS law that makes it compulsory. There is absolutely no threat of arrest. The law passed in the House and the Senate by many of you here was well thought out.
Senator Morris-Dixon says the growing misinformation surrounding the launch of the National Identification System has left many Jamaicans fearful and unwilling to sign up. However, Minister Morris-Dixon says she has absolute confidence in the National Identification Registration Authority and the new identification system.
And I don't think we could have a more esteemed body taking on that responsibility. And so I have a lot of confidence, and I know the administration has a lot of confidence, and the people of Jamaica should have confidence in the fact that we have created a very robust system with checks and balances throughout it that will secure the interests of the people of Jamaica. It's not an easy feat to establish a new system, much less a new national identification system. We aim for one nation, one identity, and the national ID is a key component of taking us to the future we deserve.
Senator Dana Morris-Dixon, Minister of Information, Skills and Digital Transformation.
The temporary manager appointed by the Financial Services Commission, FSC, to wind up operations at Brokerage House Stocks and Securities Limited, Ken Tomlinson, is in the process of handing over operations to the trustee appointed by the principals of the company. This follows a ruling by the Supreme Court on Friday. SSL, which is the subject of a multi-billion-dollar fraud investigation, has been granted leave to voluntarily wind up operations under the supervision of the court. Siobhan Campbell tells us more.
Supreme Court Justice David Batts affirmed that SSL trustee Cadion Campbell is the person lawfully empowered to wind up and reorganize the beleaguered brokerage house. Justice Batts also ruled that the winding up of SSL, which the company initiated on January 16, 2023, may resume subject to the supervision of the court. Ken Tomlinson had been appointed by the FSC to, among other things, do the work that Cadion Campbell had already been tasked with by SSL. Based on Friday's ruling by Justice Batts, Tomlinson must immediately provide all reports and documents about the company and its operations. Speaking with Nationwide News on Friday, Mr. Tomlinson said his staff are already in the process of complying with the ruling. Importantly, the ruling by Justice Batts also declared Tomlinson's actions throughout his custodianship of SSL to be lawful and done in good faith. Justice Batts says he saw no practical or useful purpose in ordering that all the work done by Tomlinson over the period be undone. All suits against SSL principals also remain on hold for the time being, as per Justice Batts' ruling. Legendary athlete Usain Bolt, one of the victims of the multi-billion-dollar fraud perpetrated at SSL, is among those waiting to sue the entity and its principals. Costs have also been awarded to the principals and the trustee. The trustee of SSL must provide a report to the court on September 26, 2024, 90 days after Friday's ruling. The FSC, through the temporary manager, was in the process of returning client funds and securities. This continued up to Thursday. However, there's now uncertainty about whether this will be followed through by SSL's trustee. Meanwhile, according to well-placed sources at the Financial Investigation Division, investigators believe they've gained enough information to continue their investigation and prosecution of fraud-related matters. However, they're concerned that the ruling could jeopardize potential cooperation from SSL going forward. Former client relations manager at the securities dealer, Jean-Ann Panton, remains the only individual criminally charged for the fraud thus far. She's booked to return to court on September 20. Siobhan Campbell for Nationwide News.
Meanwhile, opposition spokesman Julian Robinson is calling on the government to urgently address the implications of today's court ruling that ousted the temporary management of the fraud-hit Stocks and Securities Limited, SSL. Mr. Robinson expressed deep concern over the court's decision, emphasizing the potential negative impact on investor confidence both locally and internationally.
The People's National Party is calling on the government to urgently address the implication of today's court ruling, which has removed the Financial Services Commission from its temporary management of SSL and has handed it over to a private sector practitioner who is appointed by the same management group who presided over the insolvency of SSL. We're deeply concerned that the court's decision will have a negative impact on investor confidence both locally and internationally. It is important that any government through its regulator can act quickly where there is fraud in a financial institution to protect the integrity of the entire financial services sector. The government has to make a decision very quickly as to whether it is going to appeal this decision and determine what framework will be put in place to ensure that investor confidence is maintained at a high level.
Julian Robinson, opposition spokesman on finance.
You're listening to Nationwide News at 5. More news after these.
Value Drug Pharmacy offers curbside pickup and delivery of your branded and generic drugs. WhatsApp your prescription to 876-881-6695. The time by Value Drug Pharmacy is
5:14.
Rent-A-Kill Initial is the expert in pest control, air purification, and hygiene services. Call today 876-926-4236.
The temperature by Rent-A-Kill is
31 degrees Celsius in Kingston, 30 degrees Celsius in Montego Bay.
Straight from the rock so it flows. Enjoy life letting go. Feel the breeze, mountain reach, water clean, nature green. Everything's good with Catherine Speed. Rain or sun is shining, Mother Nature's blessings. Nature green, everything's good with Catherine Speed.
Scientific Research Council, making science and technology work for you. With research and development,
SRC reinforcing Jamaica with added strength.
From the fields to the labs, we gather and review information.
Detailed research as a foundation,
combined with tech and innovation, working for you to fulfill the plan to develop and help uplift we nation. And that's the mission. The Scientific Research Council, making science and technology work for you.
For more information, call the SRC at 876-927-1771.
Continuing the news, Prime Minister Andrew Holness says the country has made massive strides in strengthening the social safety net to protect the most vulnerable Jamaicans. The Prime Minister made the comment while addressing the annual general meeting of the Jamaica Civil Service Association on Thursday.
And I just want you for a moment, think about how Jamaica is different today as a result of the changes we have made to our social safety net. Think about it. So we had the NIDS, which we celebrated recently, LG Newland. Then we had PATH. Now we have the social pension. This administration put that in a few years ago, and we almost doubled the amount in the last budget. We have the tourism pension plan. Minister Clark announced the unemployment insurance. We have now the new social housing program.
Mr. Holness says the ongoing review of the PATH program is intended to add to the effort of ensuring Jamaicans who are struggling are better served by the state. The Ministry of Labour and Social Security has launched a series of consultations aimed at hearing the views of stakeholders on how best to improve the country's signature social safety project. The Prime Minister says the plan is to ensure the government can reach vulnerable Jamaicans in a targeted manner.
So social safety net 10 years ago is not the same as social safety net today. Today we are capturing more Jamaicans in the social safety net in a targeted way to improve their lives. We have taken that on and we're doing quite well there.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister says he's dissatisfied with the state of garbage collection and waste disposal in the country.
In terms of waste disposal, garbage collection, big challenge, massive challenge. No one here can say we're satisfied about that. I certainly don't like the way in which my country looks now. And so we have a plan to deal with it. It has turned out to be a very complicated subject as it relates to how do we create an economy around waste.
In a wide-ranging presentation to delegates of the Jamaica Civil Service Association on Thursday, the Prime Minister told his audience that the government intends to build up economic activity around waste management. He says that's one of the key approaches to ensure proper garbage disposal across the country.
Waste has no value, so it's just all over. So we need to create an economy around waste where people can say, waste has value, let me take it up. Instead of throwing away the bottle, let me properly dispose of this bottle because there's value in it for me. So we're building that mechanism out. You'll hear a little bit more about that.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness.
30 people have been arrested in the U.S. in a massive illegal drug and gun ring. A food truck specializing in Jamaican cuisine is said to be at the center of the illegal operation. The arrests and seizure followed a 6-month-long operation in New York labeled Operation Hot Lunch. Mahiri Stewart has been following the story.
In the town of Newburgh in Orange County, New York, those hungry for the best in Jamaican cuisine could satiate their appetite at the Real Spice delivery and catering food truck. The truck is owned and operated by 42-year-old Kirkland Salmon, who is believed to be a Jamaican native. Mr. Salmon's Real Spice delivery and catering food truck offered its customers a variety of Jamaican cuisines, such as jerk chicken, oxtail, and escovitch fish. One could even wash the food down with some coconut water or an island fruit drink. However, There were other items on the menu that most patrons may not have realized. According to the Orange County Sheriff's Office, a multi-jurisdictional narcotics and firearm tracking operation was conducted on Tuesday, May 21. This followed a 6-month-long investigation dubbed by the police as Operation Hot Lunch. The investigation, which involved over 40 law enforcement agencies, including the NYPD, uncovered an illegal narcotics distribution organization as well as an independent illegal firearms distribution organization. Both discoveries tracked back to the same source, the food truck in Newburgh, operated by Mr. Salmon. The operation saw the recovery of 31 firearms, 11.5 kilograms of cocaine, 90 grams of fentanyl, and $45,000 in US currency. A ghost gun, an assault rifle, and several long guns were among the firearms seized. Guns were photographed being concealed in styrofoam food boxes used to serve meals. Several vehicles were also recovered, including the food truck itself. The sheriff's office described the bust as the biggest in the history of Orange County. The guns were sent to the truck from North Carolina, while the drugs were sourced from Florida. A nearby barber shop was also used as a makeshift stash house to hide the illegal items. District Attorney of Orange County, David Hoovler, says the money made from the illegal trafficking ring was invested in numerous areas.
It sold food, it sold guns, and it sold cocaine. And Mr. Salmon was the epicenter of that. The money of this organization moved around with ease. It was invested into real estate, property, and crypto, in properties in Orange County and other things.
30 people were arrested in relation to the ring, with ages ranging from 21 to 78 years old. Mr. Salmon, the mastermind of the operation, is facing up to 25 years in prison. Orange County Police say 3 suspects believed to be involved in the ring are still at large. When Nationwide News visited Real Spice's page, we were met with a message that read, quote, "We're sorry, Real Spice is not accepting online orders at this time," end quote. Mahiri Stewart for Nationwide News.
World in a Minute is brought to you by ABC Electrical Sales. We make things as easy as ABC. Hose assembly and supply, equipping Jamaica for success.
And Charles O'Connor Consulting Network, COCN, driven by international accounting standards, modern technology, and integrity.
The World in a Minute.
In global news, small island developing states, SIDS, have adopted a 10-year plan seeking international support to fend off severe and existential threats. Antigua and Barbuda Prime Minister Gaston Brown says the plan will be used to agitate and advocate on behalf of SIDS among various global bodies. The group of 39 countries hailing from the Caribbean, Pacific, and Indian Oceans are home to 65 million people. The plan aims to help SIDS diversify their economies and strengthen their productive capacities for sustainable development. They are investing in advanced technology and the digital economy, developing renewable energy, and boosting trade. The plan also focuses on tourism, which represents 20% of GDP, almost 2/3 of SIDS, and up to 65% of the Maldives economy. The plan calls for the reforms of the international financial systems, considering factors like economic dependence and climate change exposure.
U.S. President Joe Biden has urged Hamas to accept a new Israeli proposal to end the conflict in Gaza. The 3-part proposal would begin with a 6-week ceasefire in which the Israeli Defense Forces would withdraw from populated areas of Gaza. Speaking at the White House on Friday, Biden says the first phase of the proposed plan would include a complete ceasefire, the withdrawal of IDF forces from populated areas, and the exchange of hostages for Palestinian prisoners. He added that the ceasefire would allow more humanitarian aid to reach the besieged territory. The second phase would see all remaining living hostages returned, including male soldiers. The third phase would see the final remains of any deceased Israeli hostages returned, as well as a major reconstruction plan with U.S. and international assistance to rebuild homes, schools, and hospitals. In a statement, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu insisted that the war would not end until its goals were achieved. This includes the return of all hostages and the elimination of Hamas's military and governmental capabilities.
World in a Minute was brought to you by ABC Electrical Sales. We make things as easy as ABC. Hose Assembly and Supply, equipping Jamaica for success.
And Charles O'Connor Consulting Network, COCN, driven by international accounting standards, modern technology, and integrity. Recapping the top stories making nationwide news at this hour, the JLP's Kamina Johnson-Smith rejects rumors that she's a dual citizen.
My father born in Kingston, my mother born in Trelawney. I born in Kingston. I'm 100% Jamaican.
PNP Senator Lambert Brown labels as hypocrisy the government's position on dual citizenship.
But JLP Senator Abka Fitz-Henley says Senator Brown's assertion is mere propaganda.
Prime Minister Andrew Holness says massive steps have been taken in strengthening the country's social safety.
I'm Nora Gay Banton.
And I'm Mahiri Stewart.
You can find the news on our website at nationwideradiojm.com and on the Nationwide app available on the Google Play and the App Store.
News next, the headlines at 6.
News at 5 was brought to you by Fosrich Company Limited, fostering rich customer service.
Plan your tomorrow today. Introducing JMMB's Hello Future Retirement Planning website. Figure out how much you'll need to be set for life with our calculated tools and tips at your fingertips. Visit hellofuture.jmmb.com and start your journey to your dream retirement today. Conditions apply.
Join Jamaicans for Justice for their third and final town hall in their constitutional reform, Safeguarding Human Rights Town Hall series. Friday, May 31, 2024, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Carl Hendrickson Auditorium at Jamaica College. Engage directly with top industry experts and advocates, Professor Trevor Monroe, King's Counsel Michael Hilton, Tamika Harris, and Clyde Williams. Come with your questions and concerns, then leave with answers. See you in Kingston. Contact 876-755-4524 for more details.
Tune in to this broadcast during Nationwide at 5, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on May 31, 2024. Catch Nationwide at 5 on the grounds of Jamaica College or tune in to Nationwide at 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by Jamaicans for Justice. Justice for one, justice for all.
Good afternoon with your sports report. I am Alric Swaby. We start with track and field. It's the eve of the 6th Racers Grand Prix at the National Stadium, and all the big names are in the island for the World Continental Tour Silver starting at 7 p.m. The meet will feature a Super 100 meters class between reigning world champion Noah Lyles in a rematch of the Budapest Showdown with Jarnell Hughes and Oblique Seville and Africa's fastest man Ferdinand Omanyala. Several other mega classes are on the card, including the men's sprint hurdles matchup between Olympic champion Hans Parchment and the Commonwealth Games champion Rashid Broadbell. Olympic bronze medalist Megan Tapper will come face-to-face with indoor 60-meter hurdles world record holder Divine Charlton and young star Akiwa Nugent. National sensation Jaden Hibbert and Will Clay of the USA will battle in the men's triple jump. Alana Reid and newly minted world indoor champion Julian Alfred will clash over 100 meters, while the women's 400 meters will feature defending champion Cherokee Young and Stephanie Ann McPherson. The world 400 meters champion Antonio Watson and 400 meters hurdle junior world record holder Rashawn Clark will also be in action. Nationwide 90 FM will have live coverage of the meet, starting with a special edition of Sports Nation Live at 5:10 from the National Stadium. 17-year-old St. George's College schoolboy Adrian Reed Jr. has been called up to Jamaica's 26-member senior men's football squad for the upcoming CONCACAF World Cup qualifier against the Dominican Republic at the National Stadium next Thursday. Reid, who also played a key role in Cavaliers' National Premier League title success, is the only newcomer in the squad, which has 6 players who ply their trade in the local Premier League. Sporting director at Cavalier, Rudolph Speed, believes the senior team is a natural progression for young Reid, who has also played at the junior level for Jamaica.
He's one of the kids that play beyond his age. He's just 17 years of age, and the truth is, you can see his maturity that he displayed. And I'm just happy that the coach see fit to give him an opportunity to represent Jamaica.
Rudolph Speed. Jamaica's senior women's football team defender Alison Swaby says she's honoured to be captaining the side in the 2-match friendly international against Brazil in Brazil. Swaby will skipper the side in the absence of regular captain Khadija Bunny Shaw, who is out with an injury. The girls will take on host in the first match in Recife tomorrow, with Game 2 set for Salvador 3 days later.
It comes with a lot of pressure because I want to drive the standards, uphold the standards of the badge, and to always make the country proud. And I think that, we have a group of players that makes that really easy, to be honest. But yeah, I think for my family, it's really special for them as well. And I think when I started in the program, I didn't really envision that that's where my future would have kind of lent me to. But I'm so, grateful and honored to be able to lead these girls when I do have the opportunity. And like I said, they make my job easy because they're all professionals.
Alison Swaby. Noted that ballers Kingston Hummingbirds and St. James Sharp will lock horns in the opening match of the 2024 Red Stripe-flavoured Netball Jamaica Elite League at the National Indoor Sports Centre this evening at 7. Coach of the Hummingbirds, Nadia Hansen, says the match will be entertaining.
I'm pretty sure they can expect an exciting game. Both teams are coming for a win. The good thing about it, the teams are a little bit more balanced this year. We want the turnout and we want every game to be exciting. I'm expecting a pretty good show.
Nadia Hansen. It's now time for the Nationwide Olympic Fact, sponsored by Fontana Pharmacy.
This is Nationwide's Olympic Facts, brought to you by Fontana Pharmacy. It's all good inside.
Did you know that Omar McLeod is the first Jamaican to win gold in the men's 110 meters hurdles at the Olympics? Yes, that's a fact. At the 2016 Rio Games, Omar McLeod won gold in the sprint hurdles in 13.05 seconds.
That was Nationwide's Olympic Facts, brought to you by Fontana Pharmacy. It's all good inside.
There you have it, or Olympic Facts, sponsored by Fontana Pharmacy. And remember, Nationwide 90 FM will have live and exclusive radio coverage of the Paris Summer Games. I'm Alex Swaby, and that's your sports.
Hyundai, the home of modern, premium, affordable vehicles. Call us at 876-630-1511. The time by Hyundai is
5:32.
You didn't know that the government decreased JUTC bus fares? Yes, it's now 70 for adults, 25 for children, and 30 for pensioners. And in April, fares will go down even further to 50 for adults, 20 for children, and 25 for pensioners.
The temperature by the office of the Prime Minister is
31 degrees Celsius in City Kingston and 30 in Montego Bay.
Outperform, outlast. With top performance. Jackama. Reliable, full stop, not comma. We have the expertise for drilling and demolition. We have the power tools for plumbers and electricians. Fancy select tools, 3 parts and 3 repairs. 3 parts, 3 repairs. 2 to 3 years. Hilton, available at Delta Supply, 106 Hagley Park Road. Call us at 876-302-61124. Delta Supply, we service what we sell.
Deposit we have insurance. It's an account that come with assurance. Let me teach you why it's important to have deposit insurance. Just in case your bank crash dead, no need to put your hands by your head. Up to 1.2 million you get for all accounts that's affected. Yeah, one room you can start it, or throw a house party. Pay your mortgage with ease. JDIC is a smart win. Deposits we bring safety. JDIC them protect me. Bank and billing society protected. The flow you must get with. Protect your savings smart. We urging you to call me. Guarantee you need us. We take banking serious.
JDIC, protecting deposits for you and me.
My name is Kedrin Campbell. I come from the Appleton Basic School. My favorite Olympic hero is Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce.
Watch for Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce.
Looking back now, I say there's no barrier when it comes to your passion and your calling as time honors your greatness. So I thank you so much, and I pray that you'll be an inspiration to all young girls, mainly the girls, to know that there's no limits when you believe what you believe and continue to work hard. We are strong, we are powerful, and most importantly, we are fearless.
It's glorious gold once again to Shelly-Ann Fraser-Pryce.
Stay tuned to the Paris Olympic on Nationwide 90 FM. Yay!
Good afternoon, good afternoon. It is Friday, May 31, 5:35, and time for the cover story. I'm Siobhan Campbell.
Good afternoon, listeners. I'm Ricardo Brooks. Good afternoon, Siobhan.
Good afternoon, Ricardo. How are you doing over there?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Doing quite well. Well, let's get into it. The Financial Services Commission, FSC, has lost its bid to retain control of the fraud-hit brokerage house Stocks and Securities Limited, SSL. That's according to a ruling handed down by Justice David Batts in the Supreme Court on Friday. The ruling follows a hearing into the matter which began on February 26 and ended on May 10.
The FSC had installed Kenneth Tomlinson as temporary manager of SSL. The FSC tasked Thompson with winding up SSL, but Justice Batts ruled that the SSL-appointed trustee, Cadion Campbell, is the individual who should get on with the task of winding up and reorganizing the entity.
Justice Batts also ruled that the winding up of SSL, which began on January 16, 2023, may resume subject to the supervision of the court. Cadion Campbell has been ordered to return to court within 90 days to submit a report on the progress of the winding up operation. It's uncertain how today's ruling by Justice Batts will impact the ongoing fraud investigation at SSL. We will be now joined by Campbell's attorney, Carolyn Hay. Good afternoon, Madam Hay.
Good afternoon. Let me apologize at this point for any background noise you may hear. It will soon quiet down.
You sound quite clear at this point in time.
Clear?
Yes.
All right, fine. Good.
So, just to get an immediate reaction from you, Madam Hay, in terms of the victory in the court today for your clients.
Well, it was a long, difficult experience for Mr. Campbell in particular. It was very unusual for a trustee who was asked by a company to do a job of a technical and skilled nature to end up as a defendant in proceedings just for accepting a retainer or agreeing to do a service. So at the end, it was perhaps a relief, perhaps the beginning of a challenge, who knows, but it was a good, well-reasoned decision coming at the end of quite a long bit of litigation.
I understand your client has been given leave to continue the winding up operations. Has the temporary manager, that being Ken Tomlinson, and the FSC given way or given leave to go ahead?
Well, it's not so much whether they have given leave to go ahead. The order has been made. I heard a report on your station that the team from the temporary management, they are putting things in place for the handover. I don't anticipate any difficulty. It's a judgment that was handed down this morning. So I would imagine that if the communications haven't begun even informally, they will begin formally quite quickly. And I don't see a difficulty with the management team that's in place now transitioning to the trustee. I believe both Mr. Campbell and Mr. Tomlinson know each other. They are both licensed trustees, and there are that many in the country. It's a pretty small group. So I don't expect that there'll be any difficulty in the transition or the handover. Mr. Campbell has to do a report to the Supreme Court. It's due in 90 days, and it will have to take into account the content of the report he receives from Mr. Tomlinson. So I do expect there to be a fairly smooth transfer of information without too much more drama.
And King's Counsel, since the Supreme Court ruling was handed down this morning, there have been questions as to how the ruling, if at all, affects the ongoing investigation. Can you clarify for us if there's any such impact?
I don't. You can imagine that because I have a brief from Mr. Campbell, a lot of the information behind that wouldn't be shared with me. But I can't see why. In fact, in the judgment, Justice Batts indicated that he sees no impediment to the continuing by the trustee to the investigation such as they are or such as they are reputed to be. The only thing that is barred at this point is any proceeding, whether civil or criminal, against the company without the leave of the court. But any individuals who may or may not have been involved with the company and any of those allegations that are either being made or have been made, to my mind, continue. And I understand that the FID is taking that position.
And further to that question by Mr. Brooks, is there any intention, or I don't know if you can speak to it really, but is there any intention on the part of the trustee or the principals of SSL to not comply with the requests that may come from the FSC going forward?
I can't speak to the principals of SSL. As it stands now, those would be the stakeholders or the shareholders of SSL. I don't speak for them, and I can't imagine that they would be involved, or I don't know if they'd be involved in the investigation. From my client's part, prior to the commencement of this litigation, he has always, and he has been on record saying that he will cooperate with any reasonable effort taken to pursue the objective, which is at the time, it was the winding up for the purposes of reorganizing the affairs of SSL. His written position, his oral position has been always to facilitate what needs to be done. The role of a trustee does not block or bar criminal investigations. And in fact, where under his stewardship he comes across anything that needs to be referred for further investigation or possible prosecution under the Companies Act, he is compelled to pass that information on to the DPP or to the Commissioner of Police. So the trustee really, in my own view, had he been allowed to do his job, quite possibly we'd be much further along. In the judgment, Justice Batts agreed with our submission and the submission of the independent attorney who represented SSL that the role of the trustee and the role of the temporary manager are two different things. They're distinct. And the role of the temporary manager manages an entity that is operating. Once they determine to wind themselves up for the purposes of organization, they weren't operating anymore. So really, in my view, the appointment of the temporary manager was redundant in the circumstances. So had there not been an injunction, Mr. Campbell would have been able to do his work. Creditors would have been called in. Claims would have been validated. And I believe at least we would know a lot more about the inner workings of the organization than we know now.
And we should also tell the listeners, Siobhan, that we did invite the FSC to be part of this conversation. They indicated they'd be sending out a statement to offer clarification. I don't believe the newsroom has received that statement just yet. Caroline, hey, at the start of the conversation, you mentioned, how long this matter has been before the courts. And I want you, in as simple a way as possible, explain to our listeners what exactly was at the heart of this litigation.
All right. For the listeners to understand that, the chronology of events needs to be set out. SSL, which I'll call SSL, first defendant, discovered irregularities at its institution sometime in January of 2023. On the 10th of January 2023, the company wrote to the FSC, advising the FSC of what it had uncovered, but indicating that the extent of the impact of what could be a fraud was at the time unknown. The FSC said that they did some investigations or queries, and that by the 12th of January, they were writing back to the SSL to indicate that they were going to put in what are called directions, which are really guiding rules to the company as to what they can do from what they cannot do. On the 13th, the company wrote back to the FSC and indicated that they were going to take steps to curtail the problem, organize itself, and move forward. On the 16th of January, the company appointed Mr. Campbell as its trustee. On the 17th of January, the FSC countered with the appointment of its temporary manager. The two persons, Mr. Tomlinson as temporary manager and Mr. Campbell as trustee, could not come to consensus as to how to perform their respective duties. And so on the 25th of January, the FSC went to court without notice to SSL or Mr. Campbell, filed a claim and obtained an injunction preventing Mr. Campbell from performing his function. The claim eventually became about who should be the representative of the company. So it started off with Mr. Campbell being first in time with a different function. The FSC responding by appointing a temporary manager and asserting a regulatory authority. They got an order preventing Mr. Campbell from performing his function and then sought a declaration that he was improperly appointed because he was appointed without their permission. In the judgment, the court acknowledged that there was nothing in the law that gave the FSC the right to control the actions or decisions of members of a company. And once the members of the company, that would be SSL's shareholders, took a decision that was open to them to take, they didn't need the FSC's permission, they could organize themselves and they could appoint a trustee. Then having done so first in time, it was not within the power of the FSC to stop them. So the injunction was discharged and Mr. Campbell is said to continue his function as at the date of the judgment.
Please hold it there, Madam Casey Hay. We have a break upon us.
Clearing personal, non-commercial shipments at the port? Avoid the wait. Request a contactless clearance through your agent today. It's more efficient. It's secure. The time by the Jamaica Customs Agency is
5:48.
Fast, friendly service? Check. Delicious chicken? Check. Get Quick Chick. Drive-through available at 29 Grand Spen Road. Great taste without the wait. The temperature by Quick Chick is
31 degrees Celsius here in the capital city, Kingston, and 30 degrees out west in Montego Bay.
Invest in Jamaica and make your money grow. Invest in Mayberry Jamaican Equities Bond, a safe and purposeful way to invest. How? We carefully invest your funds in top local companies, empowering you to profit from multiple businesses, not just one. With a minimum investment of just $20,000 and an interest rate of up to 10.5% per annum, it's more than just growth. It's profit with purpose. Discover more at www.profitwithpurposeja.com or contact your investment advisor for full details. Profit with purpose. Invest with Mayberry.
Welcome back to the cover story, where we're discussing this matter of the Financial Services Commission losing its bid to retain control of the brokerage house Stocks and Securities Limited. Control now defaults back to trustee appointed by SSL Cadian Campbell, and we have on with us to discuss the matter the attorney representing Mr. Campbell, King's Counsel Caroline Hay. Casey Hay, I have a question regarding the particular part of the ruling where the judge suggested that he could not or felt it impractical to undo what Ken Tomlinson had done in terms of his custodianship over the entity? Is it that the trustee felt that there were some things that needed to be reset in terms of Mr. Tomlinson's management over the last year or so?
No, it didn't arise in that way at all. What happens is when you are trying to determine when a start date, what is the start date for a person's appointment, it is open to the court to choose the date of the company's resolution, which in this case would have been the 16th of January 2023, and to relate back its decision on the validity of the appointment to that date, or to start as at the date administratively as practical as possible, which could be the date of the decision. So as a result of that, there would be no question of invalidity by reason of authority over the period. And it is the cases say that the judges are to be very practical about this, because when you interrupt or put a question mark over the authority of a person to act during a period, then you begin to affect contracts into which they might have entered, or you begin to undermine the acts or decisions they may have taken during that period. And in that period of flux, you really want as much stability as possible. So the cases require the judges to take very practical, not academic or technical approaches, but you want to do what the courts know, the new term is practical justice. You want to do what is practicable and realistic and will cause the least damage to the parties that have interacted with the company that was under distress in that period.
Okay. Well, I mean, to go even further, though, I know Mr. Tomlinson, along with the FSC, took certain decisions under that custodianship, for example, reducing the staff complement, utilizing the funds that were there to pay members of staff, as well as starting the process of giving back some of the client funds that were held by SSL to their respective owners. Is the trustee, as he is coming in to take over from Mr. Tomlinson, fine with many of those actions, and will he continue along those lines?
I can't say. Yeah, and in fact, you know, we do depend very much on the media for information. We were not privy to information and to what was happening at the institution during the period of the injunction. And so, and that's part of the reason why the court in its wisdom made an order that the company in this litigation be independently represented. And so that is how King's Counsel Larmont came into the picture, because the company, it was a unique and odd situation, we argued, where you could have a regulator that is managing a company and at the same time has sued it for certain release, and at the same time was defending it in other litigation where other persons had sued the company. So in the course of developing for this matter, the court made an order that the company, as an entity in law, what we call a juristic person, was entitled to its own representation. And that's how independent representation came in. Having said that, we can't make a comment on what we are likely to do because we don't know what we will find. What I can tell you is that I expect my client to obey the provisions of the Companies Act and to perform his duties. And whatever those duties require him to do, I'm quite certain under advice he will do them. As to what they will be, I don't know. If he takes a different view, for example, of the insurance proceeds that the news reported was paid over by the company's insurer, and takes a different view as to what should have been done in terms of those distributions, then he'll have to advise himself or be advised as to what his next steps should be. I have absolutely no doubt that he'll be willing to do what is required of him. And you have to remember, this is a winding up now that's under the supervision of the court, which is what we sought in the counterclaim. And in fact, prior to the litigation, Mr. Campbell wrote and offered to the FSC that they jointly go to the court with him for an order bringing the winding up under the supervision of the court and for joint trustees. So when I started by saying that this was long and difficult litigation, in our respectful view, it was also unnecessary litigation. And it has certainly forced this gentleman to incur quite a bit of expense, time, and hassle to end up with the same result that he proposed prior to the start of the litigation.
And I would assume that is where the costs and damages come into play. Does it extend to other aspects of SSL's operation, or just in terms of the cost incurred to fight the litigation?
Once a party loses their claim, they're exposed to a cost order. In this case, the FSC gave an undertaking that they would abide by any order as to damages in exchange for the injunction. Justice Batts did indicate that there's a provision in the FSC Act that will have to be considered, which I believe, without refreshing my memory, is the indemnity provision that says that where they act in good faith, you can't proceed against them. But that I don't wish to litigate that issue before digesting the judgment and taking instructions myself. And in any event, I don't do my litigation in the public domain. I do it in court. So I think that your question was what would the cost relate to? It would relate to the litigation. What would damages relate to? That is a matter we'd have to examine.
Understood. Then just finally from me, Casey Hay, the matter regarding the client funds that were essentially on the process of being taken away from SSL and sent elsewhere, will that process continue? To the best of your knowledge, do you know if that process will continue?
When you say on the client funds that were taken away and sent, to exactly what you asked.
For example, the securities and other funds that were held on behalf of clients by SSL, I know the process had started under the temporary manager for those to be sent to other financial institutions and other securities dealers.
You're talking about what the temporary manager advertised in the papers.
Yes. Will that process continue?
Sure. I can't say. I don't wish to preempt the trustee. I certainly don't have those skills and that ability to analyze what should be done and what ought to be done. And I think that he needs to be given the time to be able to go in, see exactly the state of play, and then take considered decisions. So I can't say and don't wish to preempt him and have no instructions to say what he will do next. What I'm sure he will do is his duty.
Understood. That's King's Counsel Carolyn Hay. Thank you again, madam, for your time.
You're welcome. A pleasant weekend to your listeners and to you.
Okay, and over to you, Mr. Brooks. I understand you have something for us coming up after 6 o'clock.
Yes, Siobhan, that's right. We are at Jamaica College at the Carl Hendrickson Auditorium for Jamaicans for Justice's Constitutional Reform Town Hall. Yes, and they got underway just about 20 minutes ago. We are scheduled to hear from the Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice, Michael Jackson. Former Solicitor General Michael Hilton will also be making a presentation. Maziki Tame, a lecturer at the University of the West Indies. Trevor Monroe, the founding director of National Integrity Action, will also make a presentation. So the theme is constitutional reform and human rights. Yes, as you know, that's a hot button issue at this point.
Yes.
The reform of Jamaica's constitution. So it's a town hall meeting. The audience, members of the public, are streaming into the auditorium, and we will bring you all the highlights from Jamaica College.
Okay, I hand it over to your very capable hands, Mr. Brooks. We take a break and we'll go back right to you.
Say hello to peace of mind and goodbye to worry with Guardian Life's new Ultimate Provider Plan, and secure your medical expenses in the event of critical illness today. Call 888-367-5433 for details.
The time by Guardian Life is
5:59.
Upgrade your kitchen and bathroom to the next level with Unique Living. They're the ultimate destination for all your kitchen and bathroom needs, from luxurious shower systems to exquisite faucets, vanities, sinks, toilets, closets, and more. They have it all. Visit shop number 6, 30 Dunrobin Avenue, Kingston 10, or call them at 876-755-3661. Elevate your space with Unique Living, where quality meets expectations.
Nationwide 90 FM is at it again. Team Revolution will clear every hurdle and sprint to the finish line as we cover the games of the 33rd Olympiad from Paris, the city of love.
3 meters clear, 5 meters clear, and away he goes. He continues on his way towards another gold medal. 5 gold medals, 5 world records.
Nationwide's coverage is powered by our diamond sponsor, Fosrich, fostering rich customer service across all locations island-wide.
Join Jamaicans for Justice for their third and final town hall in their constitutional reform, Safeguarding Human Rights Town Hall series. Friday, May 31, 2024, from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Carl Hendrickson Auditorium at Jamaica College. Engage directly with top industry experts and advocates. Professor Trevor Monroe, King's Counsel Michael Hilton, Tamika Harris, and Clyde Williams. Come with your questions and concerns, then leave with answers. See you in Kingston. Contact 876-755-4524 for more details.
Tune in to this broadcast during Nationwide at 5, 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. on May 31, 2024. Catch Nationwide at 5 on the grounds of Jamaica College, or tune in to Nationwide at 90 FM, the new revolution in media. This broadcast is brought to you by Jamaicans for Justice. Justice for one, justice for all.
Listeners, it's a minute after 6 and we're coming to you live from Jamaica College for Jamaicans for Justice's Constitutional Reform Town Hall. At this point, the lectern is the Executive Director for Jamaicans for Justice, Mikel Jackson. She's taking the audience through how JFJ sees key portions of the Constitutional Reform Committee's recommendations. Of course, you know that report has been tabled in the House of Representatives. So let's take you to the podium now to hear from the Executive Director for Jamaicans for Justice.
Cut some ribbons and so on. I want you to think about what types of powers the non-executive president would have. So, for example, recently we heard about the government going to Parliament, and in a matter of 3 hours, you saw wherein the tenure of the Director of Public Prosecution, it also had implications for the Auditor General, but it was more so important because the DPP had already gotten an extension before, and no more was allowed by the Constitution. And the government went to Parliament in 3 hours. They moved the age of retirement from 60 years to 65. Why am I mentioning that? Had we a non-executive president with the powers that JFJ is recommending, the non-executive president could, like what happens in other jurisdictions, for example, Ireland, say, you know what? Before I put my signature on this bill to become law, let me make reference to the Supreme Court to tell me if this is in keeping with the Constitution. That is the type of powers I'm talking about now. Not walking around and cutting ribbons, but powers that would be there to offer checks and balances to the government. Our version of a non-executive president here at JFJ could also say, before I sign off on a law, maybe I would suggest to the House of Representatives to reconsider a provision that I have concern about. No president should be a rubber stamp for any political party. And we're adamant on that as we make our recommendations to the government on what the reserved powers ought to be. So these are the things I want us to be thinking about critically as we have a conversation. I don't want to go too much because the panelists are here, and we have to ensure that we break down the topics so it to make sense. Because I don't want anybody to leave here and they say, but what then did say again? What does that mean? Please feel free to ask the questions. In the booklet that you have, and I keep putting it up, when you go through, you would recognize that for every single recommendation, there are some guiding questions that you can ask the panelists. I want you to think on these things and ask yourself, what type of president do I want and why? What type of republic do I want and why? What are my rights in the Constitution? Do I want them to be strengthened? And when you hear proposals coming in from the opposition or the ruling political party, I want you to ask yourself the question, what is the implication of this recommendation? What is the implication for the composition of the Senate? Do I understand these things? It's not supposed to be above your head. Ask any question that you have. That is why the panelists are here, to break it down for you, ensure that you understand it. No question should be off limits. And I know the dual citizenship is one that's taking up the news. JJ didn't have any position then. We don't have any now, but we can offer some guidelines on perhaps what we should be thinking about for dual citizenship at some point. So put your questions together and we will answer. Michelle Thomas is still not here? No? All right, so I'm going to start with Professor Trevor. No, I'll start with Mr. Michael Hilton, attorney at law, King's Counsel, because he has a great PowerPoint that he's going to be setting the context in terms of why we should care about what is happening. Casey, you will come here or you want to take the mic?
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Michael. And if I may just use the opportunity to congratulate Mr. Tingle again for that excellent presentation. As Michael said, I want to spend the few minutes I have here at this podium by talking about why the Constitution is important. We have, unfortunately, not just in Jamaica, but in many countries, public that doesn't, generally speaking, doesn't think the Constitution necessarily matters to them or affects their lives. They think that the Constitution is something that is for the lawyers and the politicians, and that, of course, translates into constitutional reform. That process is something that is something distant from them and doesn't affect them directly. Now, how do I move these slides? This one? So, why is the Constitution important? The Constitution basically does two things. It indicates who has the power to do what. So there are various branches of government, various public positions and offices, and they have different powers. And the Constitution defines who has the powers. And more importantly, I think, it also decides what checks and balances can be placed on those powers. Who restrains the powers given to the various people? Now, our system is one that results in the government having powers that are extremely wide, and government can pass any law, make any decisions in relation to employment or government and so on, restrained only by the Constitution. In some systems, the very structure of government creates a check and balance, so that in the US, for example, you have a Congress which is not necessarily controlled by the same political party as the president, as is the case right now. That is in itself a check and balance. And in fact, in some countries where it's the same party, there's a culture of not automatically following what the president or the prime minister does. In our system, the prime minister always controls the Senate and the House. So the prime minister controls the parliament. And we don't have a culture of backbenchers voting against the Prime Minister. So effectively, you have a situation where the Prime Minister has extensive powers over the legislative branch, the Parliament, and over the executive branch. The only restriction on his powers and on the Cabinet's and the government's powers is the Constitution. And the Constitution sets out the things that the government cannot do or the things that they must do. And it seeks to restrict the government's powers in various ways. And I'll just mention a few of them. There is the Charter of Rights, the section of the Constitution that sets out the fundamental rights of every citizen. And I had a look at the JFJ's excellent pamphlet that summarizes a number of these rights and explains them briefly. Life, liberty, freedom of religion, and so on. It has a system, the Constitution does, where I've just mentioned the Parliament and the executive. But the other branch of government, the judges, are a critical part of our system because that's the body that needs to be independent of the executive and Parliament, and the body that the typical explanation of the judge's role is they interpret the laws. But it's more than that. They enforce the laws, they enforce the Constitution, and they enforce the human rights that the Constitution gives us, because the Constitution giving us those rights doesn't really assist us unless there's somebody there to enforce them. And that's what the courts are there to do. And it's important for the purposes of the courts and the judges being able to carry out that role, that they have the independence and security to be fearless and independent in carrying out this role in relation to the government's powers against over the people. And this discussion that has taken place in relation to constitutional reform has certainly increased public attention and public interest. And we need to recognize that it's not surprising that there's limited interest in the Constitution and people feeling it doesn't necessarily affect their lives. Part of that is because of the document itself not being very readable. It's written by lawyers for lawyers, not really written for the people. And also, to some extent, it's the fault of the lawyers and those of us who should spend more time and more effort in explaining and getting people involved in the Constitution and in some of the issues that are on the program for today. And that is why organizations like JFJ and meetings like this play such an important role in educating and informing members of the public about their rights and about these issues, especially at a time like this when there's a discussion about constitutional reform. And we need to ensure that such reforms as take place strengthen our rights and strengthen the public's position under the Constitution and do not weaken our rights in any way. Thank you.
Thank you so much to Casey Hilton for sharing. And, you know, as he was speaking, people tend to think that, as you rightly said, the judges are only there to interpret. No, our system goes a little bit more. And Casey Hilton himself have been a part of challenges that have seen the judges not only interpret the law, but really some slight judicial activism have taken place, some would argue, which is a good thing, because when executive branches and the legislature act, because there's fusion of power between the two, the judiciary as the independent branch of government of the state is there to ensure that the Constitution is respected fulsomely, right? So, to continue, we will go to Dr. Maziki. Is it Thame or Tame? Fame. Okay. I don't want Westwood to haul me, for mispronouncing the H's, but please come. And she's a political scientist, so we are properly represented. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So I want to speak from the perspective of something that concerns me, and it is the level of participation and interest that the public has in this issue, as well as I want to expand a bit this conversation around human rights and to think through this in terms of the majority group, the people of African descent in Jamaica, but that is not to say that it is meant to suggest that rights accorded to that group are not meant to be generalized and should say something to us about the state of the nation in general. Now, I want to begin from the perspective that is offered in the report of the Constitutional Reform Committee that recognizes as a problem that there is no preamble in the Jamaican Constitution. And they recommend that to remedy that, an expert group of a poet laureate and other students of literature, including a musician, be constituted to determine what the Constitution's preamble should say. But I want to ask, what is to guide these students of beautiful words in determining what the preamble should say? For me, deciding on a preamble is actually an opportunity for our Constitution to become a living document, relevant to people's everyday lives. That is, of course, if it becomes an expression of the common good and the popular will, a statement of we the people. There is no we the people in the Jamaican Constitution. A statement of we the people is an expression of the popular will as well as an agreement between the state and citizens about the obligations of the state to protect the citizen, the kind of society that we want to build, and the values that we think will produce the outcomes that we desire. It produces a social contract, if you will. We can think of the agreement in those terms. Our concerns about the Jamaicanization of the Constitution, therefore, should not be limited to determining that our elected officials should be citizens. It should also think about the entitlements of citizenship that are captured in the Charter of Rights, and I agree with JFJ's recommendation that these should be expanded, but I also think that the expansion should consider the differences between individual rights, or individual human rights specifically, and collective rights. There was an African who was enslaved named Olaudah Equiano, who was able to secure his freedom. He was a sailor. He traveled throughout the Caribbean and the United States. And one of the things that he argued in his publication, his biography, was that he could not be free in the midst of slavery. And we learn from this that we, his descendants, have a history that is tied to collective oppression and by extension also a common destiny that is built from that brutal history. To speak of the common good and collective rights in Jamaica means correcting the legacies of slavery and colonialism here. It means contending with the fact that when people say we want justice, they don't just mean before the courts. They mean they want respect for the person instead of violence, control, anti-blackness, gender inequality, class cleavages, and political tribalism. When they say we want justice, they mean also social goods like bridges, health care, including reproductive health, social security, and access to natural resources like the land, beaches, and water. In historical context, therefore, collective rights must include protections for people of African descent related to their dehumanization in Jamaica, such as we have seen anti-black hair discrimination in schools, and this would relate also to private and public bodies. It would include a right to education which recognizes historical trauma and the need for reparations and reparative justice, as well as the protection of ancestral spaces and practices. Whereas we have some appreciation of workers' rights in Jamaica, I would wish to add the right to leisure, rest, and free time. This is important to reparatory justice and improving the condition of people of African descent whose ancestors came to labor as enslaved people and got little rest. Possibilities for rest and leisure are tied to collective ownership of land, water, and environmental resources. This would serve as a mediator of individual property rights, which are enshrined in the Constitution, in that I think it's important that we recall that property rights and land conquests that have specifically discriminated against people of African descent, or the majority group in Jamaica, who were themselves property and who have been impoverished by their history, do not necessarily serve that majority group. For those without wealth, their access to land and its resources are limited. And this is precisely being played out in the privatization of land along the coast in the interests of tourism investors as against the people's right of access to the beach. I'm going to end where I started, and that is on the question of how students of beautiful words will come to their understanding of what our preamble should be. The recommendation to leave the task to experts points to the need to deepen popular participation in our democracy. And we have to find a way to inspire people, to engage them in that process of deepening their democracy. It is important, even after the report has been tabled, and if we are to move on from phase 1 to some other phase, to have reasonings about the social, economic, and environmental values needed to guarantee the people as a whole and generations to come to have access to the nation's resources. It was never meant to benefit those who labored it, and critically also to guarantee them participation in decision making. And for me, that also includes our diaspora. They too have to be a part of the conversation because they are critical to, the social safety net in Jamaica, the history of Caribbean movement of people in search of better lives and circulation throughout the region and elsewhere. So it doesn't serve us to exclude them. We could think of this beyond the thinking around what political institutions need to be changed in the present, just the debate around the Senate and the form of presidency, to including a people's representative assembly, a body that could, for instance, be debating the values of our Constitution, be proposing legislation, be partaking in gender-sensitive and popular budgeting. And as such, I think critically, how we approach reform is as important as the place that we arrive at in the end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Thame. One of the things that stuck with me as she spoke was just the importance of understanding our political and social history. Because after 300 years of enslavement, we have to ensure that our Constitution reflects that reality and our current social and political context. And that is why there is no blueprint to constitutional reform, because it has to be based on the will of the people, the demands of the people, and the context within which we live. So as she was speaking, I was taking my notes. The right to leisure, free time. Again, after that 300 years, I think we deserve it, yes, as a people. I will turn over to Professor Trevor Monroe, whose books I had to read, and now I read, not because I had to or have to, but because I enjoy reading them. No longer as a political science student, but as someone who loves the written word and political history. So, Prof.
Thank you very much, Michael. Sisters and brothers, good afternoon. I want to focus in my initial remarks on a matter of great concern to us now and of much concern to those who formed our Constitution so many decades ago, and that is the issue of how do we control our politicians? Most of all, how do we hold our Prime Minister to account? That issue was broached in our independence constitution making process on the committee itself. How do you ensure that the Prime Minister's power are not dictatorial, and to that extent, how do you curb them? In that regard, I want to refer to the actual notes of the Independence Constitution Making Committee, which I had to go through those hundreds of pages for my own doctoral thesis. The initial concern with the dictatorial powers is expressed in the Independence Making Constitution Committee, none other by Norman Manley himself. Norman Manley says, and here I quote, and this is 1961, to give the Prime Minister the absolute power to get a dissolution of Parliament would allow him to bully, Norman Manley's words, not mine, to bully the entire cabinet, to say nothing of the parliamentary party. End of quotes. Manley's first vice president in that same meeting at that same time went further. He argued that, and here I quote again, in truth and in fact, a prime minister is a dictator for 5 years. Not my words again. The first vice president of the People's National Party in commenting on Norman Manley's concern. An opposition member at that time, then Edward Seaga, later to become prime minister, strongly endorsed the first vice president of the PNP's view, and here's what Seaga said, quotes, quite right, only one minister must rule. And I would refer those of you who want to see more of that conversation to my own book that Michael referred to on page 169 and 170. The dictatorial powers referenced by the Constitution makers, I want to expand because many of us may not be fully aware. I mentioned 4 of those powers. 1, to call a general election at any time that the Prime Minister considers it expedient to himself and to his party. Not necessarily good for the country, but expedient to himself and to his party, within the 5-year period that the Parliament has alive. This includes, ladies and gentlemen, the power to call a general election if the Prime Minister anticipates, as happens in parliamentary democracies, that the majority on his side would wish to change him for somebody else, a deputy or otherwise. It happened a number of times in the United Kingdom. Prime Minister May, Prime Minister Thatcher, they changed the leader, and the leader, former leader, would have to concur. In our context, in our constitution, if the Prime Minister apprehends that anybody else in his majority is going to move a vote of no confidence in him, alternatively, following that vote of no confidence, he can dissolve the entire Parliament instead of handing over, as the majority party would then wish, to his deputy or to someone else. So that is the first power we need to look at, and that was a big concern for Norman Manley. The second power. The Prime Minister can name as many members of Parliament as he wishes to the Cabinet. What this would mean, as it stands now, 40-odd members of the majority party could be named to the Cabinet. And what this does is officially and formally silence any criticism from the backbench, as it is called, of the parliamentary majority. Thirdly, the Prime Minister and the majority can amend clauses of our fundamental law, the Constitution, without any prior notice in respect of the ordinary clauses of the Constitution. And we saw that last week in relation to the clause that deals with the enacting clause of bills of Parliament. Government brought a bill. It was passed within a couple of hours, despite the abstention of the opposition and despite us, the people, having no notice of it.
Good afternoon to you again, listeners. It's 6:30 and we're coming to you live from the Carl Hendrickson Auditorium at Jamaica College. We go for the break and we'll come back with more of JFJ's Constitutional Reform Town Hall.
Welcome deluxe, the cream cracker that rises to the top. So crisp, so light, so buttery. When you're good, you're just good. Hey, had the national flavor. You go off and buy this pack. So good, it's just so good. Welcome deluxe, the cream cracker that rises to the top. So crisp, so light, so buttery. National Baking Company, just so good.
Nationwide 90 FM is at it again. Team Revolution will clear every hurdle and sprint to the finish line as we cover the games of the 33rd Olympiad from Paris, the city of love.
3 meters clear, 5 meters clear, and away he goes. He continues on his way towards another gold medal. 5 gold medals, 5 world records.
Nationwide's coverage is powered by our diamond sponsor, Fosrich, fostering rich customer service across all locations island-wide.
Thank you so much for staying with us here on Nationwide at 5. We're coming to you live from Jamaicans for Justice's Constitutional Reform Town Hall. At the lectern now is Professor Trevor Monroe, the founding director of the National Integrity Action, NIA. JFJ has put on this Constitutional Reform Town Hall where they're looking at the expansion of the Charter of Fundamental Rights, reasons for adopting the Caribbean Court of Justice, CCJ, as Jamaica's final appellate court, and the power structure of the state and more. I have with me the Community Engagement and Outreach Officer at Jamaicans for Justice, Nicholas Richards. Good evening, Nicholas.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm tired, but I'm here. I'm good.
No rest for those who show that they can work hard, I hear.
Right.
So, are you satisfied so far with how your town hall has panned out?
Well, looking at this series, and by that I mean looking at the 3 that we've had, I'm really excited because we've had really good reception, and a lot of them showed good attendance from the people of the community. So that's good.
Mm-hmm. And talk to me about how JFJ sees the importance of civic participation in this constitutional reform process.
All right. So before I get to the importance of civic participation in this constitutional reform talk, I want to define a few things so that the viewers can, really appreciate what we're talking about. So when you talk about civic, you're talking about citizens, civil society. And civil society, a word that's so widely used, you hear politicians use it all the time. What does it really mean? And it can be difficult to define. I like to define it by starting to say what it's not. So I like to think of it as three spheres. So you have the political sphere, which is government. You have your state elected officials. That is not civil society. Then you also have your business and your corporations, which is your economic sphere. And then you have the sphere of home and family life. So I'd like to say that civil society really exists between those three, and it's in non-governmental agencies formed by citizens and joined by citizens, and the objective is really to act within the interest of the people, and by doing that they might influence these spheres. Now, as we talk about civic engagement is just any individual or group of people doing activities for the betterment of a community. And when I say community, I mean, I can be a part of many communities, my school, my physical community, clubs, right? So in terms of constitutional reform, and the importance of civic engagement in constitutional reform, this constitution, or a constitution rather, was first crafted up in, I believe, 1944. And obviously I'm paraphrasing, the politicians at that time were basically saying, okay, we know better than UNO the people, so we're going to meet as the politicians and we are going to create this constitution, right? Created without the citizens' participation. Now, in 2024, obviously, as time changes, things change, the society evolves, our values evolve. And as our values evolve, so must the Constitution also evolve so that it can adequately reflect the will of the people.
And if I could pause you for a cause there. So JFJ has put forward a few recommendations in terms of what it would like to see in this constitutional reform process. And in your earlier response, you spoke to civil society representing the interest of the people. And I wondered, how does Jamaicans for Justice come to its positions as to say, this is what we believe as an organization? How wide is that consultation?
So it's very widespread. So we have, our advocacy team. We also have our legal team that has the interactions with the various clients who are experiencing the issues. A core part of our work as well is that we do many community interventions. So we're out in the communities, and we believe that to hear the issues, and we believe that if we're going to advocate for the people, we need to hear the issues from the horse's mouth. So the cross-section is wide. We also partner with our civil society partners as well as other agencies as well.
So the positions taken by JFG or other civil society groups then, as a criticism, I'm sure you've heard the criticism, it's not just the opinion of a few elite people sitting in a room pushing an ideology or an ideal.
When we in Jonestown, Craigtown, we're listening to the lady that's on the side, the side of the street selling her apples, selling her fruits. When we go into Halfway Tree, we're hearing from the people what they're experiencing.
So why do you think that perception then exists, that these are elitist views that are just concocted by an elite set of people? And I'm not saying perception is right, but you know that it exists.
Yes. I would say maybe that perception is, a part of it is obviously due to a lack of knowledge. Not everyone is aware of all that JFJ is doing. So when you hear JFJ is on the news, it might be for a press briefing, right? But when we're in the communities and we're sitting and we're listening to the issues from the people in the communities, they don't see that on the news. They don't see that being publicized in the way that some of our high-level advocacy would be publicized.
Understood. So as you talk about being in the community now and interacting with ordinary citizens, you have a slate, I understand, of upcoming public education activities.
Right, it's ongoing. It never stops.
What are some of those that are coming up?
So, of course, we have kicked off our JFJ Know Your Rights School Tour at the start of 2024 with our EU Broad Human Rights Project. So we've been in a number of schools across
That's
the
the multi-million-dollar project. The big
Right,
money
the-
project. Yes.
It sounds like
I
big
call
money,
it the
yes.
big money projects, listeners. Yes.
It does. So, our soonest will be next Friday. We will be in Manchester at Mayday High School to meet with the children and talk to them about their rights, and educate them and have a very fun, interactive activity. Last week, we were at Waterford Primary School speaking with them. So we're continuing on our Know Your Rights School, and then we also have community interventions. It's the core of what we do. So we will be at the Portmore Mall sometime within June. I can't give you exact dates yet. And then we'll also be on Sovereign on the Boulevard in June as well. So stay tuned to our social media pages for more updates on that.
And at these stops, these various stops. So you talked about, for example, in schools educating students about their rights. But all the stops, what exactly happens? Who can people expect to hear from if they should turn out?
All right, so you can expect to hear from your community engagement and outreach. Obviously, you can expect to hear from the policy and advocacy specialists. From time to time, we do have special guests that come in as well. And then also, we do have free legal clinics. So you have an attorney on site that can hear your matter and provide advice. And if it is an issue that we're going to take on, then we can proceed with providing legal counsel.
And you say this is free?
Yes. Free, man. Free.
All right. Because them have the big money project listeners. So tell me now, where can people find the list? So you mentioned a few stops. Is that list posted anywhere that people can go and keep
So there
up to
are
date?
updates that are posted to our social media. So you can find us at J for Justice on Instagram, J for Justice on X, and Jamaicans for Justice on TikTok. So we've gotten up to times around TikTok now. So check it out. All the updates are there.
Okay. I have another one for you. My producer, while we were here, she said to me, boy, a lot of seniors are coming in. And I said to her, well, perhaps that's the age demographic that's most activated and interested in these kinds of topics. When you go out to the schools and you meet the youngsters, do you find that they're interested in things like constitutional reform?
Definitely not. No.
Oh.
Not the youngsters,
Yeah.
not the 20-something individuals, because we've also been to a few colleges and universities as well. So the information itself is not very appealing. So what we have to do is find creative ways to bring it across. So, for example, for the primary schools that we've been going to, we're playing school challenge quiz with them about it, so that it's exciting and we incentivize the participation. But it itself, it's people wonder, why is this important to me? It doesn't immediately affect me. So we really have to find creative ways of bringing the information across and make it relevant.
And that effort is not just an effort that JFJ needs to undertake. So what more do you think we can do broadly as a society to engage young people on these critical issues?
Well, have more information, being accessible, and not just, someone talking about it boringly. Like, be creative in the ways that the information is being disseminated to the people. If the people aren't coming to you, go to the people. Go into the streets, have your campaigns in the different communities, at-risk communities, and then develop, these different targeted interventions to get the people involved in the conversation.
All right. And that's exactly what Jamaicans for Justice is doing here at Jamaica College, listeners, getting the people involved in the conversation at their constitutional reform town hall. And it sounds like your executive director, Michael Jackson, is back at the lectern. Nicholas Richards is the community engagement and outreach officer at Jamaicans for Justice. We take the break and come back and send you back to the lectern.
With so much to do in one location, make Megamart your one-stop shop. Pick up your groceries and houseware needs, grab a bite and pay some bills, fill your prescriptions and see the beauty products in our pharmacy. All in one amazing location. My Megamart, the best value by far.
We are the best at what we do. At Hose Assembly and Supply Limited, we supply hose fittings and tools. We guarantee we can't be beaten when price and quality are combined. You brand us the Hose and Tool Boss because we deliver the most effective industrial solutions. Come in and experience the joy of shopping with Hose Assembly and Supply Limited. Call us 876-923-3936 or visit 173 Hagley Park Road, 2 Charlesworth Crescent or Montego Bay Trade Center. Hose Assembly and Supply Limited. More than just hoses. Now open every Sunday.
Takes place at the Racers Grand Prix Saturday, June 1 at the National Stadium. World champion Noah Lyles, British record holder Zarnell Hughes, Africa's fastest man Ferdinand Amanyala, and Jamaica's favorite Blitzerville battling the 100 meters. World champion Antonio Watson takes on champion Allison. Olympic champion Hansel Parchment graces the track in his pet event. St. Lucian hotshot Julian Alfred goes up against the young Jamaican Joel Alana Reid. Devin Charlton takes on Akira Nugent. Tickets available at racersgrandprix.com, mysticonlinetix.com, and the Jamaica Pegasus starting May 24. Finish line $5,000, regular grandstand $3,000, bleachers $500. Don't miss a great night experiencing Jamaica's track and field, passion and entertainment.
Minutes to 7. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Nationwide at 5. I'm Ricardo Brooks and I'm live at Jamaica College for Jamaicans for Justice's Constitutional Reform Town Hall. The members of the public are slowly streaming in and they are attentive. They've gotten their pocket-sized constitutions and various presentations from the panelists. The panelists include Professor Trevor Monroe of NIA, Dr. Maziki Thame, a lecturer at the University of the West Indies, and King's Counsel Michael Hilton. We're going to take you back to the lecture now where Michael Jackson, the Executive Director of Jamaicans for Justice, is addressing the audience.
Those are entrenched provisions. It will retain where you need at least one opposition senator, but work with me now. You have other mechanisms or other changes that will be made or laws that will be passed, my apologies, that would need 2/3 majority. For example, extending the state of public emergency. That's not an entrenched provision issue, no. That's something that already exists and you're saying that when I call a state of public emergency, 2/3 majority vote to extend it beyond the 14 days will be needed. But work with me with the maths again. To get 2/3, which is roughly 67% of 27 senators, is 18. How much has said the government have now in the proposal? 15. How many the president have? 3. And how many the opposition have? 9. In other words, to attain 2/3, that is 18 of 27. So you can extend the state of public emergency, for example, without the opposition say. Why is that concerning? I need you to look at how this new head of state would now be elected. This new head of state, which is your non-executive president, the prime minister goes and consults with the leader of the opposition, and they arrive at some consensus. Then they take that name to the 2 houses of parliament, and they would vote separately in a secret ballot. And that is just reaffirming what the leader of the opposition and the prime minister agree to. But say the opposition leader don't agree. You know what happens next? The 2 houses then vote by way of absolute majority. So in other words, simple majority vote. So you can have a head of state that the prime minister has installed. And if that head of state has the power to nominate 3 senators at the upper house, you ask yourself the question, are those 3 senators truly independent, or is there the possibility of those 3 senators ultimately acting on behalf of the ruling political party? Food for thought as we have the conversation. All right? Did I lose anybody? Are we together? I'm just going to share the mics. Now, as we have the conversation, I will just be fielding some questions to the panelists. And please put together your own questions so that I can share them when we get to the Q&A. Now, several proposals have been made by the public, several questions. Do I want to directly elect my Prime Minister, directly elect this President? What type of powers are we looking at, and so on? So I will be sharing some questions to the panelists and see how best they can guide us through this conversation. I know I stated some things for food for thought, but let me start with one of the more pressing questions that have been put forward by the public. People want the right to elect directly their Prime Minister. And I will start with Michael Hilton on that one, to hear his perspective on whether or not we should be looking at directly electing our Prime Minister.
Is it on?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. I am one of the persons who support that view. We have a system now where people don't vote for a Prime Minister. They vote for an MP, and then the MPs effectively vote for the Prime Minister. And what that means is you may prefer to have Mr. Holness as your Prime Minister, but to have the PNP candidate as your MP. You're faced with a choice where to achieve one end, you need to abandon the other. And what that does is perpetuate a system where MPs see their role as being supportive of the Prime Minister, supportive of the government, primarily and perhaps only, and not the constituency representative role that they ought to play. And I therefore support a system where you vote for Prime Minister separately, Prime Minister or President, whatever you want to call the office, the head of state, the head of government, and you vote separately for your MPs. Now, in an ideal world, you would have different votes, and you'd have different bodies supporting. But I appreciate that may not be the case. But nonetheless, that would be my position.
All right. Thank you so much. I know Prof has a thought, but I have a specific question to you, Prof. the one that you posed to me when you were sharing your thoughts on JFJ's proposal. Dr. Thame, do you have any opinion on this before I get to Prof?
I agree that direct election is appropriate. I think that in order to encourage participation, even while it is that voter turnout may be presently low, we have to think of the future. We have to think of the possibilities of engaging the public more and more in the political process. And voting is not the only mechanism, but it is one of the mechanisms. I see that JFJ's concern is that this will simply take the partisan form that the two-party system manifests. But it is possible also for independents to run in presidential elections and disrupt that two-party consolidation that has existed in Jamaica since the 1930s, really, 40s.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Thame. Prof, you asked me a question when I had asked you to share your thoughts on a section in JFJ's. When you directly elect the Prime Minister, how do you get rid of that person, and what are the dangers?
I think that would be my concern. Obviously, your ability to elect the Prime Minister directly is attractive because you then don't have to make that difficult choice between the constituency rep of the party, who you feel will be no good an MP, but he's in the party whose leader you wish to be Prime Minister. The problem with that is, if we now have a difficulty in holding to account and in controlling a Prime Minister who is indirectly elected, because it's the majority who puts him as Prime Minister, as head of the party in the Parliament, how much more we're going to be able to control a Prime Minister who will then say, "Uno, elect me to run the government, not the majority in the Parliament. You elect me directly." And therefore, my support with that, for that position, would have to be accompanied by the most stringent mechanisms for accountability, and one of which you mentioned, Michael, and that exists in some countries, the right of recall. That is to say, a situation in which a specific number of the electorate, a percentage of the electorate, can initiate what is called a recall petition. If you don't like how the MP is performing, they have promised everything and delivered nothing, you, in between elections, you don't have to wait, you don't have a permanent job for 5 years, can initiate a process to call that member back. And we'd have to have a similar kind of situation for a Prime Minister elected in that way. He couldn't have the same powers as he has now, because the dictatorial powers which the constitution makers themselves saw and were worried by, some of them supported it wholeheartedly, Manley felt reservations, would have that much more difficulty in controlling that particular office. So I think that we'd need to think through different mechanisms for control and management and holding that person to account at the same time as we were to put forward that position of direct election.
All right. Thank you so much. Now, similarly, I want to ask the recommendation by some, and I think a vast majority of the Jamaican people would prefer to directly elect the non-executive president now. So JFJ supports the direct election of a prime minister, offering the caution of accountability while ensuring that the person is able to act based on the will of the people, so to speak, who would have elected that person. But accountability is important. But we do not support direct election of the president because from our perspective, the president ought to be the symbol of unity. And then if the non-executive president has some of the reserved powers that we would want, you do not want that non-executive president, when they exercise those powers, for example, having an impartial set of commissioners at the Integrity Commission, having an impartial public defender, hopefully the National Human Rights Institute, having an impartial set of people at the Electoral Commission of Jamaica. I think the fear for us at JFJ, when you have those powers that ought to be above the political fray, that the moment you are directly elected by the people and you're in a campaign, that your views and the perception that you are politically biased may happen. That is our view, but I want to ask the view of the panelists on the direct election of the non-executive president. Dr. Fame, let me start with you.
I thought that's what we were talking about before. But, you know, for me, it's important to look at the system in a kind of integrated fashion. And I think one of the things that Prof. Monroe said just now, which is important, is that it's not just about direct elections. It's also about, okay, so what is the role of this specific office? And what are the mechanisms that are put in place to check and balance the powers of either house or either authority within the state? So, you know, direct elections could, on the one hand, improve participation, but it could, on the other, entrench dictatorial authority, because this individual would argue, you know, I have been elected by the people have spoken, etc. But it's really important to look at the whole system and how it works to counter that, you know, dictatorial authority.
Thank you so much.
Well,
Yes?
if I can just start by saying, I totally agree with the comments of both my fellow panelists on the question of greater accountability and restraint. So whether it was a directly elected prime minister or not, you need to have increased restraints. And a recall process is an important part of that, and many of the other things that we've discussed. Now, when we're discussing direct elections, and I like your comment about that's what you thought we were talking about, because in a way we were. If you have one person, one head, which is whether president or prime minister, the views I had expressed earlier about direct elections would apply there. If you have, though, what you are considering, which is a prime minister and a president who then acts as a check and balance,
yes,
I support JFJ's position. that you have a directly elected prime minister who is the head of government, who is the person who has the governmental responsibilities and functions, while the governor general has has powers really designed to me, more check and balance, but also, I think what you've said about the national unity issue. And what then gets important is how is that person chosen. I agree not directly elected, but let's have a discussion about how that person is chosen, not by the Prime Minister.
which we go back to the overview I gave earlier, which is why we're concerned about the proposal coming from the CRC.
Good evening again, listeners. It's 7 o'clock and we're up on a break, but just before we go to the break, we have a statement from the Financial Services Commission regarding that court matter today. It reads, the Financial Services Commission acknowledges the Supreme Court's ruling today in the matter of the Financial Services Commission FSC and Stocks and Securities Limited SSL. The court has confirmed the insolvency of SSL and mandated a court-supervised winding up of the entity, underscoring the gravity of the situation facing the company. Such an order validates the FSC's assessment and regulatory actions that would have been taken up to this point. The court found no issue with the conduct of the temporary manager appointed by the FSC, recognizing the diligence exercised during the management period. However, the court has ruled that the temporary management by the FSC appointed manager instituted on or around January 17, 2023 ceases immediately. The process of winding up SSL will continue with the trustee appointed by SSL in place for the purpose of the court-supervised wind-up and reorganization. The FSC will remain actively involved in this process, ensuring that the winding up process is conducted transparently and in the best interest of all stakeholders. It says the court has also stayed all proceedings against SSL, providing a period of stability for the reorganization efforts. Yeah, and it quotes the executive director of the FSC, Lieutenant Colonel Karen Burrell. He says the FSC respects the court's decision. However, the commission is currently reviewing the judgment and assessing the available options, including potential further applications to the court in furtherance of its mandate as a regulator. The FSC will continue to work to safeguard the interests of SSL's clients and the broader financial system. We're coming to you live from Jamaica College for Jamaicans for Justice, their town hall meeting on constitutional reform. We take the break and come back with more.
Invest in Jamaica and make your money grow. Invest in Mayberry Jamaican Equities Bond, a safe and purposeful way to invest. How? We carefully invest your funds in top local companies, empowering you to profit from multiple businesses, not just one. With a minimum investment of just $20,000 and an interest rate of up to 10.5% per annum, it's more than just growth. It's profit with purpose. Discover more at www.profitwithpurposeja.com or contact your investment advisor for full details. Profit with purpose. Invest with Mayberry.
For all your electrical needs, visit ABC Electrical Sales. They stock a wide variety of electrical supplies including plugs, switches, panel boards and conduits, plus energy-saving fixtures. ABC Electrical Sales stocks brands like GE, Siemens, Philips, Cutler Hammer and Allen Bradley. They also offer free island-wide delivery just to suit your needs. Visit them at Shop 8, Hagley Park Plaza, Kingston 10, or call 876-754-3714-5 or 876-754-3825-8. ABC Electrical Sales, for a better choice in the electrical business.
After 7, and we're coming to you live from Jamaica College. Jamaicans for Justice having their constitutional reform town hall. We're being joined online by the chairman of Jamaicans for Justice, John Clark. Good evening, John.
Good evening, and thanks for having me.
All right, so I understand you're going to talk to us about the importance of having a human rights institution in Jamaica. Now, most Jamaicans know we have the Public Defender, we have the Integrity Commission, we have the Office of the DPP. What exactly would be the role of a national human rights institution?
Well, the role of the public defender is limited, and it's limited under the Act because when it was originally passed, that law was intended to be a temporary law and to allow the public defender to be there whilst the Parliament try and develop something, a better and more powerful public authority which can deal with and carry on behalf of the government many of our human rights issues. But that has been in the pipeline for more than 10 years, and a national human rights institution will be a state-mandated body given the power of the state to investigate human rights abuses and to ensure that the state's constitutional or legal mandate is being carried out to protect and promote the human rights of all Jamaican citizens at a national level. The public defender, as powerful as that body is, has not been given the mandate to do all of what it needs to do to carry out the human rights and to protect all human rights or to investigate all of the complaints, nor the resources. And with the National Human Rights Institution, which is an international framework that we committed as a nation that we will be introducing in Jamaica, one would hope that the resources and the statutory power that would be necessary to enhance the constitutional rights of all citizens will be reposed in that body.
And in terms of the structure of this human rights institution, how would that be structured?
Well, one of the framework is to utilize that was proposed, is to utilize the same Office of the Public Defender, but to ensure that it's enhanced, given more resources, given more statutory power, and given the ability to investigate, receive certain complaints, and to carry out the entire role of a national human rights institution.
Would such a body be entrenched in the Constitution?
Yes. Hello?
Yes, are you hearing me?
Yes, I'm hearing you, yes.
Yes, I'm saying would such a body be entrenched in the Constitution?
It would be nice to have that body entrenched in the Constitution because invariably, once human rights are being enforced, there sometimes create clashes between the governed and the governor. And the governor sometimes is whichever party is in power. And different parties will have different focus and different ideas as to what is human rights. So when we have this independent body who is carrying out the role on behalf of the citizen, we wouldn't want them to be thinking that their mandate can be easily swayed and changed by virtue of who is in power. So we would prefer for it to be in the Constitution and entrenched in the Constitution, but ultimately that's a decision that the government will make. But one would hope that however it is done, it will be something that cannot be easily removed just by the change of the political will.
But why wouldn't we just strengthen the Office of the Public Defender instead of coming up with a whole new bureaucratic structure?
Because the public defender, as you will hear even from the name of the word public defender, is almost seen and often seen as almost as a form of an advocate, whereas the National Human Rights Institution would be a different body and a different creature entirely, which would have the power essentially to make determination on its own of violations and to mandate how those violations can be corrected. So the problem with the public defender is not linked to any particular office holder, because right now we have a very good office holder in the person of Carolyn Reed Cameron, and we have had before her time persons like Arlene Harrison Henry, and persons have dedicated a lot of work within that office. But one of the key things is even the public defender sees something wrong, is that essentially they're mandated to just write reports and then to try and beg persons to comply. And what one would want with the National Human Rights Institution is a new paradigm shift with a body who has some teeth and the ability to have these things enforced. And unfortunately, the Public Defender's Office is an office that has been around for some time, and what with a National Human Rights Institute, and even if we want to use the Public Defender, the framework that is necessary, one would hope that it sends the message, even by its name, that it's a new paradigm shift, new respect for constitutional rights, and that therefore the old skin is being thrown out, and we are creating a brand new framework to deal with long-standing problems.
And in that construct, what would happen to the Office of the Public Defender?
Well, in the Office of the Public Defender, same like what is happening, I believe, with RGD in the NIDS scenario. The RGD, I believe, is subsumed under the new NRA, and what one would hope is that the public defender's role would be subsumed under the National Human Rights Institute. It doesn't mean that there may not be a public defender which has a separate niche and work to do in the NRI, but ultimately, because the scope of the work is so wide and so broad and so important, that it would be necessary, in my view, to have a body entirely distinct from the public defender without completely replacing and throwing out everything. So there's good work being done by the public defender, but if you speak to persons in that office, they would say one of the problems they have is, one, resources and an ability to implement some of the things that they think are most needed to be implemented.
Where else in the world has a national human rights institution worked?
I didn't hear your question, sorry.
Where else in the world has a national human rights institution worked?
It has worked in so many countries. I believe one of them would be in South Africa, and it is not a construct that we are the first persons who are thinking about that construct. It is a construct, in fact, that is in so many countries, but the importance of it is that because if you look at in Jamaica, when persons speak about human rights, they would ordinarily associate Jamaicans for Justice as an organization who is one of the most preeminent organizations speaking on human rights. But when we as an organization, which is a non-government organization, not funded by the government, resource-constrained organization, fight for certain things, ultimately it would be better and easier for the organization and for the country if you have an independent body which is funded by the taxpayers, who's able to deal with some of the long-standing problems that affect every single Jamaican citizen. And that is the real intention behind a Human Rights Institute. With the public defender, for example, complaints have to be made to the public defender for them to, quote-unquote, get a jurisdiction to deal with something. But with a Human Rights Institution, they'll have the statutory mandate to examine long-standing problems and to try and craft for our country a solution to same. So, for example, you ask where the world has it started. If you look at the South African country, they had a long-standing problem in relation to what had taken place after they gained independence, and they had to have something called reconciliation. And that is to fix problems like those, that a National Human Rights Institution would be very helpful to look at those long-standing problems and to see how, as a nation, we can resolve these problems to the betterment of all.
Mm-hmm. And how advanced are the conversations with policymakers about this proposal?
Well, I believe it was so advanced at a stage that we had reached a stage where persons said that there was a commitment made by Winston Chuck, and I can speak with him about that in relation to when the government will be moving forward with that. And we have heard many public commitments on transforming the Public Defender Office into and subsuming it into a National Human Rights Institute, because ultimately it can only redound to the benefit of Jamaica. Because I recall, and I'm sure Ricardo would have heard that story, that who elected Jamaicans for Justice to be out there talking about what is human rights concerns for Jamaica.
Indeed.
And the National Human Rights Institution will be that independent body representing the interests of Jamaican citizens, and who may very well somehow serve as a counterbalance to some of what we think are important. Because what if the National Human Rights Institution examine, for example, the crime problem and form the view that, we need some emergency measures to deal with it, then we would have an independent body separate from the NGOs producing a report and indicating on behalf of those concerned Jamaicans may very well see a way to balance human rights concerns with security concerns, and that may very well redound to the nation's benefit.
But wouldn't that complicate your mandate and your efforts, though? If you have such a body, which would then, in my estimation, based on what you've described, become the preeminent body in the country concerned with human rights, saying that, those crazy people at Jamaicans for Justice actually don't know what they're talking about?
And that may very well be the case, but may very well redound to a Jamaica which is more informed, And because ultimately Jamaicans for Justice, and I can say that as a chairperson, is a non-government organization that fights ultimately for its survival every year in terms of funding, etc. And there is a concern that some Jamaicans have expressed as it relates to, well, if we're getting funding from international donors, to what extent can those international donors influence our view of what is human rights in this country?
And what is your response to that?
Well,
because that's a legitimate concern.
It is a legitimate concern, and that's one of the reasons why there are persons in Jamaican for Justice who form the view that we do not mind, to some extent, being redundant. Our main concern is to have a country which have respect for human rights and which is more rights conscious. And if we have a national institution that is able to carry out the mandate that we have been doing for free for this nation, and carry it out better, and carry it out in a manner that sees human rights being enhanced, it can only redound to the interests of all Jamaicans. And it would be better for us as a country to have that being done here, so the people of Jamaica are determining entirely what are our human rights concerns, rather than to have organizations like my own who ultimately are fighting for the survival and who may be influenced by persons who will provide donor support. But in any event, to address the real concern about that, as an organization, as GFJ, we are ultimately concerned, as I would say as a member, with what we think are the human rights concerns. But with a national human rights body created by the people of Jamaica, funded by the people of Jamaica, to be clear to the people that it is the people, through the National Human Rights Institute, which is dictating what is the human rights concerns for the nation, and answering to organizations like us who may be teetering on the edge of certain rights that persons don't think is the right balance.
Mm-hmm. And just so we're clear, for my listeners, because you brought it up and we've heard the criticism so often, because you take donor funding from overseas, does that mean that those donors, whoever they are, that they get to dictate the positions that you take here in Jamaica?
And to answer that pointedly, no, because ultimately, as an organization, we are created from 1999 Articles of Association, which essentially indicated what are our concerns. So our concerns are locally and dictated by our members, and ultimately any donor funding that we get would have to match those concerns. And if they don't match the concerns, then our board and our members will not permit us to take funding from organizations that don't meet our original and objectives.
Oh, so you seek out funding from
police killing?
Yes.
Our donors will be given grants for police killing.
Ah, okay. Understood. John Clark is the chairman of the Jamaicans for Justice. We are at the organization's constitutional reform town hall at Jamaica College. John Clark talking to us there about the importance of Jamaica establishing a national human rights institution to become the preeminent body in Jamaica for the protection and advancement of human rights. And John Clark indicating quite candidly that Jamaicans for Justice is prepared, to become redundant if it is that the rights of Jamaicans are ultimately put or placed in a position where they are always respected. John Clark, thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good one. We're going to take the break, listeners, and then when we come back, we're going to go back to the podium where the panelists are taking questions. The panelists, Professor Trevor Monroe, Dr. Maziki Thame, and King's Counsel Michael Hilton. Soon come.
With so much to do in one location, make Megamart your one-stop shop. Pick up your groceries and houseware needs, grab a bite and pay some bills. Fill your prescriptions and see the beauty products in our pharmacy. All in one amazing location. My Megamart, the best value by far.
Nationwide 90 FM is at it again. Team Revolution will clear every hurdle and sprint to the finish line as we cover the games of the 33rd Olympiad from Paris, the city of love.
3 meters clear, 5 meters clear, and away he goes. He continues on his way towards another gold medal. 5 gold medals. 5 world records.
Nationwide's coverage is powered by our diamond sponsor, Fosrich, fostering rich customer service across all locations island-wide.
None of mercy. This one is very classic, dedicated to all the schoolers who are taking beats.
If you've ever struggled to pass an exam, then you'll know that students today are under great pressure to get good grades and secure qualification needed to move on to higher education. The problem is that too many students are struggling alone and could really benefit from connecting with hardworking teachers and other bright students in other parts of the country and the region. Join me, Dennis Brooks, this and every Friday evening from 8 to 9, with a repeat on Saturday morning from 8 to 9. For the A-Team, a study group on radio, my team of teachers, students, and experts will break down the syllabus, giving you information, tips, and past paper questions that will help you get top grades in your upcoming exams. Follow us on Facebook Live and on Twitter and be a part of the community. It's the A-Team, Fridays at 8 p.m. with a repeat at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. It's your free extra class on radio and social media. And it's right here on Nationwide 90 FM, the revolution in media.
Thank you so much for staying with us here on Nationwide at 5, coming to you live from Jamaica College for Jamaicans for Justice's Constitutional Reform Town Hall. We take you back to the stage.
Benefit from integration with the Caribbean, and the CCJ is one institution that represents that.
Yes, thank you so much. Prof?
Could I agree with all that has been said on the CCJ? And also to pose a question to the public here and online. What happens if tomorrow morning the British government decides that the Privy Council should stop hearing appeals? That's their decision to make. So we're going to then run round, go to Port of Spain and beg, well, you know, we had reservations about you, but the British tell we must leave them, so we have to come to you. It is invidious. It's an invasion of our sovereignty, which is no longer acceptable. Secondly, we put money, we invested in it. Thirdly, I recall very well when I was in the Senate, we debated, along with members of parliament here and in other Caribbean countries, what the rules should be to ensure that judges' appointment would allow for independence and all the other criteria that we'd want our judiciary to have. So I'm all for the CCJ as soon as possible and not in no second phase.
Yes, agreed. So it's time for Q&A. So I hope you're excited to ask your questions. As we make our way to the mic, please come. As you make your way to the mic, there is a question in the chat. Please ask one of the lawyers this question. Is the government of Jamaica by legal construct a corporation named State of Jamaica?
Repeat that, please.
Is the government of Jamaica by legal construct a corporation named State of Jamaica?
No. No, it's not a corporation by legal construct. I'm not sure what the question is getting at, but the answer to that would be no.
Okay. And another question before I get to the gentleman on the mic. I heard this in the public space and I want to ask it. If we become a republic tomorrow, does it mean that third political parties automatically will be voted into the House and then we become a coalition government? Prof, I will give you that one.
I'm trying to understand. If we become a republic tomorrow, following a referendum, God forbid, without us having the kind of public education first, then it wouldn't change immediately the status of the existing political parties, nor other elements of our constitution regarding the right to vote and so on.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, man.
Want to state your name and the question?
I am Eru Aishaka Musa Menelek, and I represent Rastafari indigenous people. Now, when we get the thing named emancipation, 1834, 190 years till now. Now, the white man, they may get 20 million pounds for share up. Black people no get nothing. No land, no nothing. We are saying now when the Republic come, and this land, when known as Crown land, must be known as the people land. And it must share up out the people. And the people must get the land. Black people no get nothing, no, you know. So, the Dr. T.M. start to touch upon the thing about land for the ancestors and I people. We need to find out now if we are going along the road to claim the land as the people land. A 2.4 million squatters there in Jamaica, you know. 2.4, because people will pay rent as squatter too. Them live on the benefit of the landlord. Them a squatter. You understand? So we want to know how the land go.
Any of the panelists? You want to come so we can answer the question for you?
Give thanks.
Any other panelists want to take that? Dr. Thame?
I think that our Rastafari brethren was really questioning, you know, the maldistribution of wealth and the questions of, you know, who owns Jamaica really. And I agree that we should think of so-called crown lands as the people's land, and determining how to deal with that land, therefore, has to be something that is put to the people. I think we have to be very careful about the ways in which the state or governments make decisions about selling lands, selling resources, use of natural resources like water, you know, environmental issues like mining and what that means for water, and also, you know, people's ancestral rights to places like the carpet country. So, you know, I think I am in agreement with the perspective.
All right, thank you so much.
Give thanks.
Thank you. Wait, we had 1 second. She was here. You have a question? Please.
Dr. Tim, thank you very much for raising the matter, the question of, thank you, of the relevance of constitutional reform to regular people trying to live their lives daily. I want to point out here that I have the fortune of having been around when there was a new constitution, when there was vote allowed for my parents. My parents were optimistic when the vote came. My parents continued to be optimistic when independence came. But the independence, the emancipation, the abolition did not arrive and still has not arrived. Where is the hope then for people that constitutional reform will bring any greater abolition, emancipation? Because we still have the 80-20. We still have people who tonight going to bed without a meal, on bed, quote unquote. So what I really want to know is how then are we going to make all of this relevant? Or is there a risk that once again it's a discussion, a debate that takes place uptown, and then other people get called in afterwards and with a done deal?
Before I segue to the panelists, just to say I'm happy you asked that question, because I've heard public statement that laws are not made at bus stops and so on. This is where the conversation happens. At the bus stop, the corner before it gets to Parliament. So I think the need and the demand for public education is important because consensus between two political parties is a critical part of making the law, changing the Constitution. But I always say this, they act at the will and at the instruction of all of us. So it's when they meet us in spaces such as these, and when we are informed, they act based on what we demand of them. That is my point before Prof comes in.
Yeah, I fully agree with you that there has to be an explanation, convincing, between changing from a monarchy to a republic, and how is that by itself going to impact and improve the lives of the people. And I can answer immediately, that change alone will have no impact. This is not to say it isn't important. Symbols are important. There are so many of us, you know, the flag is an important symbol for us. Those of us who went to school, if you tried to change the St. George's College symbol from light blue and white, you would have a serious problem with those who have graduated and those who remain, because the symbol is what we identify with and what energizes us to act. But by itself, we need more.
You're hearing from Professor Trevor Monroe, fielding questions from the floor. The audience lining up to pose their questions to the panelists, but we're up on a break. We'll take the break and come back with more.
None of mercy. This one is very classic, dedicated to all the schoolers who are taking beats.
If you've ever struggled to pass an exam, then you'll know that students today are under great pressure to get good grades and secure qualification needed to move on to higher education. The problem is that too many students are struggling alone and could really benefit from connecting with hardworking teachers and other bright students in other parts of the country and the region. Join me, Dennis Brooks, this and every Friday evening from 8 to 9, with a repeat on Saturday morning from 8 to 9. For the A-Team, a study group on radio, my team of teachers, students, and experts will break down the syllabus, giving you information, tips, and past paper questions that will help you get top grades in your upcoming exams. Follow us on Facebook Live and on Twitter and be a part of the community. It's the A-Team. Fridays at 8 p.m. with a repeat at 8 o'clock on Saturday morning. It's your free extra class on radio and social media. And it's right here on Nationwide 90 FM, the revolution in media.
Experience Jamaica's Olympic triumphs in Jamaica Gold, a golden spotlight.
Brought to you by Horton's Pharmacy. Horton's RX Pack for better medication management.
Jamaica's third gold medal at the Olympic Games came in the men's 4x400 meters relay final at the 1952 Olympics in Helsinki. The quartet of Arthur Wint, Leslie Lang, Herb McKinley, and George Roden won the final and in the process broke the 20-year-old world record with a time of 3 minutes 03.9 seconds. McKinley's third leg of 44.6 seconds, credited with pulling Jamaica into contention from 10 meters back, is considered one of the greatest relay legs in history. On the last leg, George Roden, the 400 meters champion, and USA's Mal Whitfield, the 800 meters champion, ran virtually shoulder to shoulder, but Roden was able to keep the lead and beat Whitfield by a yard. This gave McKinley his first and only Olympic gold medal.
You just experienced a Jamaican Olympic triumph in Jamaica Gold, a golden spotlight.
Brought to you by Horton's Pharmacy. Horton's RX Pack for better medication management.
Good afternoon. Good evening, rather. Good evening to you. Thank you so much for staying with us here on Nationwide at 5. We're at Jamaica College. We're outside, as the young people would say. It's the occasion of Jamaicans for Justice's constitutional reform. We've been bringing you the presentations from the stage. Right now, what's happening is that the members of the audience are lining up to pose their questions to the panelists, but I have with me the policy and advocacy specialist at Jamaicans for Justice, Jade Williams. Hey, Jade.
Hi, Ricardo.
How are you?
I'm good, and good afternoon to your listeners. as
All
well.
right. So we're talking about now the expansion of rights and freedoms in the Constitution. And my first question is, why not just get one charter of rights? So what are we expanding?
You know, the charter that we have now came out of our very last constitutional reform process that took place in the 90s. And at that time, we came to consensus on several other things that should have been included in that charter that didn't quite make it at that specific time. So some of those things are some of the things that we want to see included, but we also have some of our own proposals that weren't considered at that time. But, you know, as we talk about expansion of rights, I brought with me my little constitutional reform pamphlet that we've been handing out to everyone here. And we have a section in it where we talk about that expansion of rights and we ask a couple of questions. So, for example, did you know that if you are male and you've experienced sexual assault, that there is little to no protection for you in the law? And that has partially to do that there is no protection from discrimination on certain bases. Right? We also have no protection from discrimination on the basis of disabilities. So while we have our Disabilities Act, that protection is not constitutional. It is by legislation, can be repealed, can be changed. Those are some of the things that we would have asked in previous years to see included. Another of those would have been the right to health care. Right now what we have is the right to a healthy and productive environment.
Right.
And that speaks generally to your environment and can speak to the effect that the environment might have on your health, but does not necessarily speak to the quality of the health facilities that you go to, the quality of medication that you receive, and the healthcare itself. So some of those inclusions are what we would have wanted to see expanded in the Constitution.
Hear you, Jade, and those are very progressive causes. But I can hear some of my listeners, you know, members of the government saying, boy, those are ideals we'd love to achieve.
Yes.
But if we should codify those as constitutional rights, then we're essentially setting up the state to fail, because some of those may be hard for us to guarantee to our citizens.
I certainly don't think if something is hard, that means it should not be considered.
All right.
You know, we are in the process of constitutional reform now, and many times before when we thought about this, we thought it would be hard to leave the UK, but that's what we're doing. So at the
We hope.
we hope, yes, most certainly. So at the end of the day, we have to have a discussion about or expansion of rights and guaranteeing them. If the discussion is not had, then there is no way to respond to it's too hard.
Right.
We suppose there are proposals out there that we have not seen that could help us to easily implement these things or more easily implement these things. So the conversation is necessary for us to get to the point where we can actually say whether they're feasible or not feasible.
Right. And you mentioned that these proposals were made, that would have been around about 2009-10 when the current charter was being discussed?
Well, these would have been proposals that would have been made before and were implemented in that 2011 charter.
So what was the reasoning that you got why some of these weren't included in the 2010 charter?
You know, there are some differences of opinion. Some things didn't quite make it to consensus, and as you said, some of the things were considered to be too difficult. When we consider like a right to healthcare, for example, guaranteeing those things that we have public healthcare here.
Yes.
So guaranteeing those things would mean additional investment in our health facilities, additional investment in our medical professionals to ensure they're properly compensated, that they're not leaving the country. So yes, those are additional obligations. At that time, they may not have been as feasible. But at this time, as we continue to improve our economic situation as a nation, we have to consider putting some of those resources into the improvement of the services that our citizens are receiving.
And that's such an interesting concept, because when you talk about the improvements that we've seen as a country in our economy, and then to tie that to human rights and the protection of human rights, I don't think most Jamaicans think about the economic development in that way. Talk to me a little bit about why that's so important.
It's absolutely important, because all of the mechanisms that we discuss, and you know, I think when we talk about human rights, we kind of think of it as a high level kind of discussion.
Yes, most Jamaicans do.
But we have a right to life, for example. that is what our offenses against the person act protects us from, to protect our right to life. So it is not so far removed from our daily activities when we talk about human rights. And as we talk about our economy, that's what we funnel our economy into, our daily activities. So we have to be putting those two things together. Otherwise, we would consistently put this human rights conversation on the back foot, allow no progress, but then continue to have the issues that arise when we don't have adequate protection for our rights. For example, we recently saw some challenges with students in a certain high school where they were not removed from the high school under the proper procedure.
Right.
We do not have a right to education at the high school level.
Right.
Our right to education is limited at the pre-primary and primary levels. Right. So even if they were to seek redress for this issue, it would have to be within the regulatory framework, which they did, and which we saw was not as effective as we would have hoped. Where we have that constitutional protection, we can go all the way to the Constitutional Court to ensure that that child has access to education.
And I accept that point. You would know, Jay, because the advocacy work is difficult work, especially in a country like Jamaica, that a lot of times when we hear about the expansion of rights and freedoms, human rights, there are powerful interest groups in this country that put us some amount of opposition because they'll tell you that's just opening the door to importing ideas or ideals that the Jamaican people may not necessarily agree with. Talk to me about how that reflex action or reaction makes the work difficult or more difficult, if it does at all.
When I hear these kinds of critiques, the first thing I think is, am I not a Jamaican citizen? Am I not one of the people who live in Jamaica, who thought about these proposals before they were made? I like all of Jamaicans for Justice, we are Jamaicans. And when we make these proposals, we make them as Jamaicans that will continue to live here and experience whatever effects come from whatever proposals we have made. And so I think that when we have this conversation about cultural norms, we have to consider the fact that we are all looking in our personal social bubble. And what might be normal thought in our personal social bubble is not the Jamaican thought. It is the Jamaican thought amongst you and your friends that you see every day, but amongst the Jamaican people, I don't think we have that kind of consensus or even that kind of consultation to accurately say that these proposals are not things that the Jamaican people want. And I have to say, Ricardo, we hear comments on our social media, on our YouTube channel, so on and so forth. But when we go into the communities, which we do so consistently, these are not the comments that we're hearing. We are hearing the echoing of the proposals that we're making, or we're hearing those same proposals posed to us in the way, my son was violated, I went to the police and they laughed. Or I was violated, I went to the police and they laughed. These are the concerns that we're talking about. When we say you're not protected as a man from sexual violence in the Constitution, it has that effect when you go into your daily life. So this is not necessarily a cultural difference as it is a lack of understanding of what the culture is moving towards.
How can we do more, or what more do we need to do to ensure that we bridge that divide and bridge those cultural differences, for want of a better term?
I think these kinds of engagements certainly go some way, but I appreciate Nationwide, for example, for giving us this platform to be able to have this discussion with the public. But I generally think that one of the challenges that we're facing is interest, right? So we start having a conversation like this, and maybe it's the framing of the conversation, this is a human rights discussion or a constitutional discussion. People think it does not affect them, or that it is not about the issue that they want to raise. But they are all so connected. And I think as citizens, we need to show our interest more by being at these kinds of events, by participating, asking our questions. I saw some comments on your page to say the place is empty, but I can assure you the place is not empty. There are quite a few people here, quite a few people lined up to ask their questions.
That's true. I'm looking at them now.
This indicates your interest as a citizen in what happens going forward. So I think that's where we need to be moving towards.
And you touched on something just now, which I think is so important in a country like Jamaica, because oftentimes our fellow citizens, a lot of them are just trying to get by. They're just trying to survive, yeah?
Absolutely.
And so bread and butter issues usually predominate, it's at the top of their list. And so when you have to say to them, come out to a town hall like this to discuss something as heady as constitutional reform, they say to your boy Jade, we just try to figure out the dinner situation. How do you break through that?
I think when we do our smaller engagements, we kind of try to alleviate some of that pressure.
Yeah.
But when it is that we're doing this kind of engagement here, I want you to think about your bread and butter issues as these same issues. We're here, for example, in Ms. Jackson's earlier discussion, she spoke to or economic and social rights.
Yes.
In our constitution right now, those are underrepresented, and those are the things that would ensure, for example, the expansion of PATH, which we know was recently discussed in the sectoral debate presentation, or, for example, receiving additional support in a similar way that they do in other jurisdictions, where a citizen who is in need of that support can apply to the government outside of the PATH program. Those are your social and economic rights. If you had those concerns, this would be an ideal forum for you to raise those concerns so that we can know as, well, not just us, but your government who will be instituting these changes into your constitution can understand that these social and economic rights are no longer non-priority for the citizens. They are an extreme priority. And it is that priority that allows them to be able to participate in higher level discussions. So you should be here. And I can understand the pressure, though, of having your bread and butter issues to deal with and not being able to find the time to deal with this kind of dialogue. And we even say to those people, we're glad that it was being streamed, so you can go online, you can get to look back at what was discussed and be able to get an idea of what happened. And we are always open at Jamaicans for Justice to answering your questions. We're not simply here for this engagement. So if you heard something discussed tonight, if you have a question from something we've said publicly, if you've received one of these constitutional reform books and you want to ask us about a proposal, give us a call. Our number is on the back. Our email address is also there, and we'll be happy to respond to your concerns and questions.
As the advocacy specialist at JFJ, when you look out across the social and political landscape of Jamaica, are you hopeful or pessimistic about the future of human rights and the expansion of those rights?
I am neutrally optimistic.
I like that. Neutrally optimistic.
I think that we are currently in a position as a nation where things can go extremely progressive or extremely not so. And I think that as the people, we have taken an increased interest in whether things go either way. And so I will reserve any specific judgments on this, but at this moment, sitting here, looking in this room, seeing these people participating, I am optimistic.
All right. Jade Williams is policy and advocacy specialist at Jamaicans for Justice, talking to us about the importance of the expansion of our rights and freedoms as Jamaicans. Those rights, of course, enshrined in the Constitution. We send you back now to the stage for more.
Briefly, we the people propose Constitution of Republic Jamaica. It's a bloodless revolution that requires a mentally emancipated way of thinking. All it needs is parliamentary ratification for implementation. A mentally emancipated way of thinking is needed for it to be appreciated. Built upon foundations laid by the Lord Jesus Christ, Marcus Messiah Garvey, and Emperor Haile Selassie. It is designed to create a new and glorious history for ourselves and our posterity that shall increase our self-esteem, dignity, and integrity. We, the people holding the authority of the country's sovereignty, designated as one people under our eternal Father, God Almighty, we are guaranteed the Universal Declaration of Rights of Humanity. Education, therefore, is the key to unlock our potentiality, supported by defense, health, finance, foreign affairs, trade, and industry, social security, transport and works, and land equality. The Council of Ministers has the tools to work together in unity with those appointed and elected in their various capacity to ensure good governance is achieved and maintained in our beautiful country. Fixed election dates guarantees stability. Impeachment and removal of corrupt elected officials ensures accountability. Acknowledging our indigenous language frees us to express ourselves legally. No extradition, no death penalty. Time limit between arrest and trial guaranteed to everybody. Full access to our beaches, waterways, forests, and natural resources. Our parliamentarians and hundreds of Jamaicans already have it for free. To get your copy, WhatsApp 1-876-225-1163. Then advocate for it to be the supreme law of our beautiful country.
All right, thank you so much. All right, we have to end with the panelists at 8 because that's the commitment made, so we have to move quickly ahead.
Thank you very much for having us.
Rather.
Yes, the name is Ranger Latham. So I came with a certain mindset about this constitutional reform thing, and my scope is sort of broadened since coming here, and which brings me to a sort of a conclusion that this constitutional reform idea is really about self-preservation of those in Parliament at the moment. So, but few points have been raised about looking at other countries externally, especially with the CCJ, etc., and all that. So now, on the CCJ, my question would be, we're contemplating changing the monarch to a presidential system, which is representational or executive or whatever you want to call it. Now, to go to CCJ as the final court, we're not with the West India Federation. So the CCJ, are we going to be, it'll be the same as we're going to London instead of going to Trinidad, and we're not a part of the broader Caribbean as a single political unit.
Keep the mic.
As a single political unit. Now, the other question that I have is the one I came here on, is to figure whether or not this parliament as it is constitutional. Reason for asking that is the September 3rd election. What I'm observing, or what I've read from the WHO Global Preparedness Board, something like that it's called, Global Preparedness Management Board, was a document they produced called World at Risk, in which it's pointed out in page 9 of it, I think, or page 10, bullet number 2, under subtitle, Progress Indicator by September 2020. The election was September 3rd, 2020. So therefore, I'm saying, if they kept the election on the 3rd, when they're instructed to queue a progress indicator for their, what we call a WHO training and simulation, what we went through was training and simulation exercise. Therefore, how can this parliament be a legal parliament? That's my question.
Okay, I heard West Indies Federation, and I'm not sure if the panelists captured to be able to respond sufficiently.
I think the answer, I understood the question,
Okay.
the latter question about the WHO and the COVID guidelines at the time.
Yes.
And there was concern at the time expressed about having the general election in September 2020, at a time when WHO effectively advised against it. That wouldn't affect the constitutionality of the parliament, of the election results. It may have been unwise, or one could question it as a policy issue, but as a legal issue, it's fine.
Okay, because I was getting something else, but all right, thank you so much. All right, go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Mohammed Abdullah. This whole concept of constitutional reform and the basic process that is now taking place is flawed. Flawed in the sense that our parliamentarians cannot find unity amongst themselves as it to relate to what they believe we as the Jamaican people want. The People's National Party selected representative. The Jamaica Labour Party selected representative. And one of the most phenomenal things that I have heard coming out of this process is from Justice Usman, where he has said the whole process needs to be cancelled because it becomes politicalized. A man of his eminence had to go to the ministry to read the document It was not given to him. And he's a part of the thing, you know, because of his own personal activity, he was unable to attend a few meetings. It is saying to us that the present person who is leading this whole process have their own agenda. And if you are going to change our constitution, why deny us the right to participate and reject from a democratic process? Because I hear everybody clamoring for the CCJ and as it relates to the Privy Council. But there's a present example as it relates to Vibes Cartel. Our legal system tried him. Our Court of Appeal tried him and did not identify. And while we had precedents of a prominent leader of this country, Michael Manley, where the jury tampering thing took place and nobody looked back to precedents. So how can we trust our own juries when that takes place? It's simple. And it's a simple law. When the jury's been tampered with, the judge tried. But they proceed to sentence the man. What would have happened to a poor man when I have money to pay a big lawyer? So these are some of the things where we have to look at. I don't really have a problem with CCJ or Privy Council. My problem is, can justice be guaranteed for all of us in an economic way where we can afford it? Meaning that I can afford a lawyer to defend me, whether here or Privy. You understand me?
Let me ask, thank you. Let me ask one of the panelists to respond.
In the interest
Dr.
of time, you might want to take 3 comments. But I would say that, I think he is pointing out the same thing that Ms. Yvonne Sovers pointed out. There's a larger question of what is the structure of our society and whether it is just, and whether therefore the Constitution should not, or this debate around Constitution should not be thinking through how do we create a more just society.
All right. Thank you. All right. All right. A minute, Prof, and then we get to the young man.
Very quickly, the issue of consensus amongst the parliamentarians is important. But that can't be the be-all and the end-all. One of the reasons why we are in this pickle now is that in 1962, you had consensus among the parliamentarians, but we the people were totally left out. So they set up a system which in many ways has shackled us. That can't be allowed again. So we need to make sure that we're not enticed. This is debate. We could change the monarch. Afterwards, we deal with all those other things that you're interested in, the policies that would help the people live their lives, women's rights. That's not acceptable. And we need to be very clear, using all the means at our disposal, social media, traditional media, to make it clear to the authorities, both publicly and privately, that public education, meaningful consultation must proceed. The civil society organizations had proposed that would take at least a year to deal with some of these difficult issues that you guys are raising.
Yes.
And that is something that we need to insist on rather than be trapped into a referendum and then all things will come after that without any guarantee whatsoever.
All right. Thank you so much. No, we have to, just because of the time, we have just about 5 minutes left with the presenters.
My name is Nathaniel Muir. My question is, if Jamaica became a republic tomorrow, what would happen to the Constitution?
I think the Constitution has to be changed in order for Jamaica to become a republic. So that's what we are working on.
And we should use the opportunity to make other changes to make Jamaica better.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Muir. All right, next.
Sure. Hi, my name is Jessica Lewis. I'm coming from more position on environmental sustainability. I'm interested in terms of framing human rights and how Jamaica can implement rights for the environment in terms of having rights of nature. A couple of countries have also implemented this, like Ecuador and Panama have given legal protection and rights to the environment and the species that encompass it, because in order for human rights to kind of live and...
All right, thank you. Just one response from one panelist. Who wants to take it?
Just a quick. 2011. The Charter of Rights gives us that right, but rights remain on paper unless they're enforced. And as we speak now, I believe there's a case before the courts, Mike, dealing with the issue of whether our right to a healthy and productive environment is not being violated by mining licenses that have been given and are now being challenged.
All right, thank you so much.
That's going to be all the time we have. That's it for us here from Jamaica College. You have been listening to Jamaicans for Justice's Constitutional Reform Town Hall under the theme Safeguarding Human Rights. Members of the audience are still posing their questions to the panelists, but we're out of time. Thank you so much for joining us for this outside broadcast. Special thanks to our producer, Dana Davey. She behaved today. So, you make it a cookie. A cookie? Yep. Expensive cookie. Like, you know, one of the nice one with the little sprinkles on it. That works? Yeah? Okay, great. Branding assistant Sheldon Richards, technical operator in studio is, of course, the pilot, Andrew Anderson, our business development executive, Lisa Andrade Thompson, videographer, the man that, I won't say that, Jamal Tucker, the news and production team led by Cara Powell. My colleagues in the newsroom, thank you all. Of course, this broadcast was brought to you by Jamaicans for Justice. Thank you so much for joining us, listeners. Good evening.